Good evening, everyone. Just getting everything started. Okay, boom. So happy Friday, everybody. As we're waiting for everybody to get here, and I'm getting messages. Okay, what's this? Okay. Hello. Okay. Sorry. I had a little bit of business to take care of, everybody. So welcome as we get ready to start up the pre-show.
Yay, the pre-show.
At some point, I'm going to make the joke, the Game Grumps joke. I'm in a pre-show. Okay, so we actually do have a couple of stories that just barely didn't make the cut for the official podcast. So I guess we'll go ahead and start with the first one. And that is the Deadpool director, or the current director of Deadpool 2, is touted for the Enter the Dragon remake. And this was one I actually didn't know was happening. We're remaking Enter the Dragon.
Yeah, I didn't know it either.
I would think that the Lee estate would be a little pissed by that.
You would think, but apparently this has been a project that's floating around Hollywood for quite a while now.
Does it have his wife's... Well, is his wife still around?
I think she is.
So does this have her approval? Makes me wonder. Because it's Shannon Lee, isn't it? No, Shannon Lee's his daughter. Because she did that Fox show that I can never remember the name to it. It was like American Gladiators, but with martial arts.
Linda Lee Caldwell.
Lee Caldwell, yeah. Yeah, does she approve of the Enter the Dragon remake?
I'll see if I can find any information on that.
I mean, I don't know if she has say in it, but the way that I understand it is Linda Lee has a good amount of say in anything that involves her former husband. So at that point, it's like, okay. Because I know she approved the Bruce Lee story.
Right. Because that was like based off her book.
I don't know if she approved the later movie, though. That's a good question, but I mean, I like Enter the Dragon. I wouldn't mind a modern retelling of it, but I can't think of anybody to play Bruce's role. Like, I know a lot of people might scream out, Jet Li or something like that, and no, Jet Li's good, but I don't think he fits the build of Bruce Lee. I think he's actually a little too buff for Bruce.
Plus, Jet Li's kind of up there in years.
Mm-hmm. You need somebody younger, and I'm not thinking of any up-and-coming talent that could do it. I mean, aside from, like, I can think of a few pro wrestlers that might be able to do it, but I don't know if they would do it. That's the thing. like just off the top of my head, Kota Ibushi might be around that build, but I think he'd be too tall. I don't know his height. Because it's going to blow people's minds, but Bruce Lee was actually, I think, like 5 foot, 5'3", something like that. He's actually he was pretty short.
He was 5'7".
5'7". Okay, yeah, he's pretty short for a dude. So at that point, Kota Ibushi height 5'11", so he'd be a little tall for that. Like if you wanted to get somebody who was like 5'8", 5'9", who was at least close to it, then I'd be okay with it. 5'11", he's bordering on 6 foot. So that might not work, but he would have the thin physique of Bruce.
Right.
And unfortunately, I don't think this article goes into any prospects for who would play Bruce Lee's character. And I guess they don't have to fit Bruce Lee's build, but it would be nice.
Yeah, they just need to be physically fit at most, really.
Yeah. But even then, I can't think of anybody. Like they'd probably have to hire like a Japanese or a Chinese star, to fulfill the role. But yeah, I'm actually really excited that, or not really excited. I'm excited that an Enter the Dragon remake is happening. I still think things are still a little saturated when it comes to remakes, but I'm okay with it. And the Deadpool 2 director, well, I mean, he's shown his clout at least with comedies, so I don't think that would be a horrible thing.
Yeah, a little bit with action, just for Deadpool's action.
Yeah. So moving on into the next story that we also had, and this one, it skirted really close to not political, but just creepy. And that's kind of why I didn't want to put it in the agenda, but Alex actually tracked it down. So anybody who's getting an Uber driver in St. Louis, Missouri, you might want to rethink that. Because one of them is a dedicated, I think he's a Twitch streamer, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's a Twitch streamer, and he just streams you. He doesn't ask for permission. He doesn't get a waiver for consent or anything like that. Actually, one of the questions that I wanted to answer, and since you're kind of our Googler, Alex, you can probably answer it right now. Does Missouri have like consent laws?
Yeah, Missouri is a one-person consent.
So he has to ask for consent.
Well, apparently, theoretically, under the Missouri law, at least this is how I've been understanding it, his consent is enough, which is why they're saying any legal action against him would be kind of an uphill battle.
What is his consent though? Because like I've seen videos of him and everything like that. It's not like I'm filming you. He's not telling them that.
Right, and that's what kind of baffles me, but this is the way I've understood it. I'd have to probably look a little deeper. We'll probably have to have Romney kind of evaluate it a bit more for us.
We'll definitely hit this when Romney gets here, but just like, this is a weird one. Like, I actually reached out to a buddy of mine who used to live in Kansas City, not in St. Louis, but just asking, like, does Missouri have some kind of consent law? And he never got back to me. But yeah, I was like wondering, like, if there's a consent law, then this guy could go to jail right now, or at least face fines. I don't know. It's like the consent laws. I believe Utah has consent laws, and it's a minor fine. It's a minor penalty if you don't adhere to them. I know Texas, it's pretty stiff, but
damn it, I can't read this article.
Anyway, so yeah, this guy has been live streaming. He basically live streams in his car while he does Uber. He's got a purple tinted Uber, or a purple interior tint to it, and then he just asks people questions, and in fact has gotten them to say a lot of revealing things about their lives. I think one of the things too that I caught later was he actually got like taxi cab confessional kind of stuff on the channel. So that also makes me wonder, okay, how is he not banned from Twitch? Because that crap will get you banned from Twitch. I don't know.
Sorry, I am kind of trying to dig a little into Missouri consent laws.
That's fine. It's just this is an odd story. I also want to get Romney in on this because, okay, here's my experience with this whole thing. I do actually know a guy who does a podcast out of his Uber. Okay. Right. He does a podcast, but he asks. Yeah. Okay. He pulls out his recorder and says, I do a podcast where I just talk to people and I put it up. It's not like Taxi Cab Confessionals or anything like that. I don't ask you any prying questions. And he does that. And then if they say no, he puts the thing back in his glove compartment. Okay. And that's what I think you should do. Because here's the thing. I think that's actually an amazing idea to be able to get all of these really random and interesting stories that you might get as you go along. Because even the most average guy is going to have, something to tell. But, and this was something that I asked him directly when I met him. I'm just like, you're asking consent, right? And he's like, oh yeah. No, totally. I'm like, good. Cause that's like, that would be almost illegal right there. If you were just kind of wiretapping and getting these and putting them up on iTunes without people's consent, that would be a problem. So I like the idea of it, but I also like the fact that, in these streams, he should be handing them a waiver saying you're being filmed. Here's the camera. And you need to approve of that. Otherwise, click, and at that point, or you can get out of the car kind of thing. So he could say, like, you can get out of the car or I can turn off the camera. And he has to be able to offer the I can turn off the camera.
Yeah.
So that's a thing. And by turn off the camera, I mean you turn off the stream. But at that point, I mean, that's what he wants to do. So maybe we'll skip the story until we can get Romney in here so that we can cover it more properly. But because even the story that I actually have is kind of blacked out now.
Yeah, I had to go look into it. I had to find a different article. I'll link it here from let's say.
Do so, because this is pretty creepy stuff.
Yeah. Here's one from the Kansas City Star.
Okay, cool. Yeah, let's get something local because then we can get all of those details. While we are waiting for Romney to get here, let's just go ahead and cover this story. A listener asked for it. I don't know why, but they did. So let's go ahead and cover it. I think it's pretty much common knowledge that next year we are getting a Charlie's Angels reboot. Okay. Right. Do I object? Now, the first question that people already ask is, do we object to this? Because we've already had a reboot. The reboot last time, correct me if I'm wrong, it was 2004 was the last movie in that line. So at that point, yeah, this would be long enough. 10, 15 years, that'd be long enough. I'd be okay with it. But we also have our Angels. And I think I know where people want us to go with this. I'm only guessing. But our Angels are Kristen Stewart, known mostly from Twilight, but also from a movie that we mention a lot, Snow White and the Huntsman.
Right.
Or as I like to call it, the Snow White is Jesus simulator. Naomi Scott, who we know from the recent Power Rangers film. Mm-hmm. And also will be Jasmine in the upcoming live-action Aladdin. And Ella Balinska. That's the only one that I am not aware of. And we also do have Elizabeth Banks, a.k.a. Miss Creepy from the Hunger Games, I'm guessing. Elizabeth Banks will be directing. Good. I don't want her in creepy makeup. Except when you're Rita Repulsa. Then I'm okay with it.
Right.
I think that's the Elizabeth Banks they're talking about. For all I know, there's a director named Elizabeth Banks, and I've got them all screwed up. But the only one I don't know is Ella Balinska. Let me see if I can look her up really quick. So what do you think about these casting choices? I mean, did you watch the reboot with Drew Barrymore and Cameron Diaz?
No, I never saw the reboot. I've never even seen the original 70s series, so I don't really have any strong opinions on it.
I've seen pieces of the original Charlie's Angels, so I know I knew who Farrah Fawcett was, but I don't remember thinking too strongly of it. And unfortunately, somebody did drag me to a couch to watch one of the Charlie's Angels movies, and I wish I had good things to say about it. I, however, do not, as it was kind of lame. Ella Balinska, she is from... Let's see. So Charlie's Angels, other stuff that we might have seen her in. She actually doesn't have too many actress credits. This would probably be her first big time movie. She did Midsummer Murders, which is a TV series, another series called Casualty, a short named 10 Men and Gwen. Yeah, a lot of shorts in here. So yeah, this would be like her first feature film debut.
Yeah, so she's an emerging actress.
An emerging actress, which I guess kind of would make sense considering the last reboot, because Drew and Cameron were kind of established, but Lucy Liu, while she had been in stuff like Ally McBeal, I think she was kind of the up and coming star out of that one.
Right.
So they got to be able to do that. Oh, and also Elizabeth Banks will be starring in the film as Bosley. So my bad. Elizabeth Banks will be in the film. She will just be oh crap, what's his name? He got a Fox show for a while. Crap.
I have no idea.
He was in the last one. Oh. He's basically what I think his name is Kevin O'Neill or something like that. The guy who did the movie with The Rock. And he also did Jumanji. He also did Jumanji with The Rock. He's that kind of a guy, but he's a little bit taller. Crap. I can't remember.
Like Ramon Rodriguez. I think that's who you're looking for.
No. Mm-mm.
No. You're thinking of who played Bosley?
Yes, so played Bosley in the movies.
Oh, in the movies, that was Bill Murray. Well, at least in the first one.
The second one is the one I'm thinking of, Full Throttle. Crap, because he eventually got a Fox. Bernie Mac.
Okay.
He got a sitcom on Fox.
Right. I remember that show.
I do too. It kind of sucked. I'm just saying.
It had some stuff I liked, but keep in mind, this was when I used to watch sitcoms religiously, so young Romney may not be the best judge.
Yeah. So, welcome, Romney. So, since you're joining in on this, your thoughts on the casting and the announcement of the Charlie's Angels reboot set for next year?
Well, I don't know much about the casting since I haven't looked at the story, but honestly, it doesn't surprise me given how many reboots we've had in this decade alone.
Okay, so I'm gonna give you the casting. So, Kristen Stewart, aka Bella from Twilight, or as we like to we always mention Snow White and the Huntsman. She was Snow White in that. Then we also have Naomi Scott, who is from Power Rangers. She was Kimberly, and she's going to be Jasmine. And then we have an up-and-comer, Ella Balinska, who's going to be the third. And then Elizabeth Banks, a.k.a. Creepy Lady from Hunger Games, and Rita from the Power Rangers movie. She's going to be stepping into direct, but also she will be starring in the film as Bosley.
I can kind of see it. And in defense of Kristen Stewart, she is not a bad actress. It's just that Snow White and the Huntsman and Twilight were just really bad roles that I don't think anyone would have been able to perform properly.
If you've got a good movie that she's in, please recommend it, because those are all I've seen.
American Ultra. That's one I would recommend. Okay. There are a couple others. A lot of the work she's done in indie films is really good. It's just a case, Twilight kind of pigeonholed her a bit, and she wanted to get as far away from that as possible. And I mean, who can blame her? But she's not a bad actress. And given the right part and with the right director, she can do good work.
Robert Pattinson was wrong? I could have sworn I read somewhere like Robert Pattinson hated her acting.
Well, he hated the source material. He hated basically being associated with Twilight in every way, shape, and form. So, and
yet he was associated with it.
Because it paid the bills.
It did pay the bills.
Yeah, because that's honestly the way it is. It's not. I know they both got along. They even dated for a while, but it's a case where Robert Pattinson hated pretty much everything about Twilight. But when you're an actor and you're not as well established, you can't really pick and choose. So.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, they kept that hidden from the Twilight fans for quite a while.
Yeah,
because they didn't want her. They didn't want them lashing the fans lashing out at Robert, because you're supposed to like Edward.
Well, yeah, because I mean, when you saw how people freaked out about the breakup, when they broke up. It's the classic case of when people confuse soap opera actors with the characters they play. It's that same classic thing where people kind of need to learn to separate fact from fiction. And so, yeah, in defense of Kristen Stewart, she's a decent actress. There have been some roles I've seen her in where she does really well. It's just she needs to be with the right people and given material that's actually something. I mean, like when you look at Snow White the Huntsman, when you see her on screen, I see an actress that has clearly been given no direction whatsoever. And that shows. It's a case where they literally basically just told her, stand there and look pretty. And she's just like,
I think that was pretty much the guideline that everybody got in that movie.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. And so the one story that we need to bounce back to on this is, so we tried to talk about this, but we finally decided we need the legal expertise of one Stephen Romney. So we'll cover this and then we'll get ready for the podcast. But we were talking about the St. Louis Uber driver who was secretly live streaming in his car. And so obviously the first question that we had was, and we answered this, does Missouri have consent laws? And it looks like they do. So according to what I know, that would basically mean he needs to ask for permission.
Yeah, like that's the key thing. He either needs to ask for permission or needs to make it clear to the people entering his car that they will be videotaped. It varies from law to law, but I know using Utah as an example, which again, Missouri, different state, they probably have different laws, but with Utah specifically, if you're going to be recording someone, you have to either A, get their permission and have them sign a release, or B, disclose the fact that they're going to be recorded. I mean, that's why you'll see these signs in businesses saying these premises are under video surveillance, because you have to make that clear.
And correct me if I'm wrong, the penalty in Utah at least is like, I can't remember, is it jail time or is it a fine? Is it considered criminal?
It depends on what you're specifically recording, at least to my knowledge. I don't know the specifics, but a lot of it really depends on if you're just recording people casually without their consent as opposed to, well, voyeurism. The charges vary depending on what specifically you're recording and where you're recording and how you're recording it.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's not necessarily like a criminal act unless you catch something criminal on camera. Then at that point, you're in trouble. But yeah, so basically, guys, this guy was a Twitch streamer and he was recording his guests. And Alex said that I guess he was able to skirt through that consent law because he did something. I don't know. I watched a few of his videos and I never heard him ask for consent. I never heard him, like, some people actually discovered where the camera was and asked if it was on, but there were other people that walked in there that they never asked and he never brought it up. So,
well, yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm not entirely certain. It's just based on the fact that Missouri is a one-party consent law state when it comes to recording.
Yeah, so at that point, like, this guy was filming people without their consent, without their knowledge, unless they knew what the camera looked like. And yeah, we're getting basic. Now, granted, I should point something out. He has been penalized. Okay, it's just he hasn't been penalized by the state of Missouri. Twitch, or not Twitch, but Uber and Lyft eventually revoked his ID, so he can no longer. Or what exactly did they do with it? Let's see. Uber has removed the driver's access to the app, and then Lyft quickly followed with that. So he is no longer in their database. He can't be asked for rides. So that's the most that they were able to pull off. Oh, and you're still quiet, Romney. So yeah, Jiminy Christmas. And some of the stuff that you actually find out in those videos, like the confessions that he got, he could be in some serious trouble and actually very, very liable to a lawsuit. One with which I guess Uber and Lyft are no longer involved in because they basically said, nope, you're no longer part of this and we disavow you and all that.
All right, testing. Am I
that worked?
Clear?
There we go.
Okay. All right. What I was trying to say before my headset decided to die is that the only way he could sidestep that law is if he had a sign in his car stating that the car was under camera surveillance and it was in plain view. But even then, that's a very big if that would have to be argued in court. But yeah, he's been penalized both by Twitch and by Lyft and Uber.
Oh, like, Twitch is in there too?
I believe so. I heard, at least I'm not sure. I know that when the story first broke, that they couldn't get a comment, but I heard that they may have suspended him from Twitch. I could be wrong, though.
Okay, good, because that's the other thing that I would be worried about is whether or not Twitch took any action. Again, some of the stuff that he actually caught were, I'm not saying he caught a lot of, at least in the videos I saw, any lewd behavior, but like he was getting taxi cab confessional type of talk and a lot of stuff that would have made him very liable for a lawsuit. Especially since he wasn't asking permission. But at that point, like even if you put a sign in there, I didn't see it, but if you put a sign in there, then a lot of people might just go, "Oh, well, that's an Uber policy," just to make sure that you're not stealing anything from him.
Yeah.
So I don't see that protecting him that well.
Yeah, it would be something that would have to be argued if it actually like went to trial and if it was either a lawsuit or a criminal case. That would be something that if he did that would have to be argued by a lawyer. But even then, that's a tough argument to make because then it raises the question of, okay, do laws that apply to businesses apply to vehicles? And that's where things can get kind of dicey. Yeah.
So in the end, like, just kind of final verdict on this. Do we think that Uber, Lyft, and Twitch did the right thing, or does this guy have the right to be able to do what he's doing? I think I've pretty much kind of stated my opinion on the matter is, like, I've known people who do stuff like this, but they ask up front, like, I have this thing. I would love to be able to record you. I have a podcast, and I would love to be able to get kind of your story for the podcast. And if they say no, he puts that thing right back in the glove compartment. Okay, which is what you're supposed to do. This guy doesn't even bring up his camera.
Nope.
Okay, let me read this real quick, and maybe you can help me interpret it, Romney. Missouri's wiretapping law is a one-party consent law. Missouri makes it a crime to intercept or record any wire, oral, or electronic communication unless one party to the conversation consents.
Yeah.
Therefore, if you operate in Missouri, you may record a conversation or phone call if you are a party to the conversation or you get prior consent from one party to the conversation, unless you're doing something to commit a criminal or torturous.
Yeah, Texas runs under the exact same law, and that's why in some cases with call centers you hear this call may be recorded or monitored.
Yeah, Utah has the same policy, has the same laws as well. So, because I know that I've talked to some people who that's kind of been to their advantage in child custody cases as well as divorce cases where, since it's a one-party system, getting that recorder has turned things around in court because, well, Utah's courts when it comes to child and family law are kind of messed up.
Oh, yeah. You're going to get no argument from me on that. But yeah, so that's basically how it works. This guy needed consent. He didn't have it. And I actually kind of wonder if now that, so we know Twitch, Uber, and Lyft's consequences. Do we see this as a big enough offense that he will get arrested for it?
It's hard to say. I mean,
I don't know the politics of Missouri, so I don't know.
Honestly, I think what would have to happen is that one of the people recorded on the stream would have to press charges. That would probably be the only way I could see this, maybe, of him facing any sort of charges, is if either one or multiple people that he had recorded decide to press charges and file those charges with the police in Missouri. But other than that, unless the DA decides to pursue it, I don't really see this going to any trial or any criminal charges.
You see it's more going to a civil court, not to a criminal court.
Yes, exactly. I mean, unless a district attorney sees something in the stream that could violate some other law in Missouri, it would probably have to fall to the people who recorded themselves to actually press charges or file a civil suit.
Yeah, exactly. So at that point, I think that's probably the best thing. That I actually think they should sue it. Like if they didn't know and they talked about something deeply personal and now it's out on the internet for all to enjoy, I think I'd probably do it if I had that. But I'm just going to point this out for all of our listeners, if we have any out in Missouri. Let the buyer beware if you go for Uber or Lyft, because he might not be the only one. Okay, that's the sad reality. He might not be the only one.
Yep. And full disclaimer, none of us are lawyers. If you were recorded and have questions about this sort of thing, please consult an actual lawyer certified by the Missouri State Bar. These are just opinions from three guys in their various bedrooms.
Yeah, true. Exactly. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get things started with the podcast. So let me know when you guys are good to go.
All right. Let me format my mic.
Rolling.
Something tells me that somebody's mic died.
Okay, mine still seems to be working.
Oh, no, I meant your other mic. I'm used to you using that.
Oh, well, this isn't recording the audio. This is just so that way I
Okay.
don't have to rely on the camera's mic. I still have my Zoom.
Gotcha. Okay.
All right, sound speed.
All right, so here we go. 3, 2, 1. Okay, let me just get everything set back up. All right. Greetings once again, my friends, and welcome back to Geek News, Reviews, and Opinions, the podcast where we talk the week's events in Geek for Friday night, July 27th, 2018. Wow, this year is just sailing by. It's almost kind of depressing that it's sailing by so fast. I am your host, Adam Mickelson, a.k.a. Drac. I hope everybody's had an awesome week thus far. For me, it's just been busy, busy, busy. We're getting ready for the baby to come, and also we've had a lot of family reunions this week, and so I've basically been bouncing from one family reunion to another. So if I seem a little tired, if I seem a little frayed, that's kind of why, people. But thankfully, I'm not here alone. I have my fellow panelists here so that we can get through the week's events in Geek. And so here, let's go ahead and introduce our panelists, our fellow geeks, our fellow YouTube content creators, our fellow awesome guys in general. And if you guys aren't following their content, what the heck is wrong with you? We'll start things off with Stephen Romney of Studio Ghost Utah, of From the Shelf, Rhapsody in Cinema, Marshall March, and the upcoming Monster Clash. Stephen Romney, how are you doing?
Doing pretty good. I mean, this week's had its ups and downs, but so far, can't really complain. For those of you watching the stream may notice I'm testing out a new headset. Oddly enough, I purchased this to use with a PlayStation 2, and it actually works really well.
Nice. It actually looks pretty good, too. So, and the sound is coming actually pretty clear, so that's awesome. And then we're also being joined by not Stephen Romney. We already got Stephen Romney. We're also being joined by Alex the Shadow Blazer Short, who has decided to gracefully join us outside of the shadows, as well as the loving embrace of, I don't know what anime are you reviewing right now? I lost track.
Nothing on the immediate docket. I'll have to find another show I want to talk about.
All right. So how you doing, Alex?
I'm doing pretty well. Just another busy work week as always. Just the summertime rush.
Well, you're kind of busy with our stuff too, because in the next couple of weeks, we're actually getting ready to welcome my second daughter into the world, and that also involves the Shadow Blazer himself. He actually has to help out a little bit for it.
Yeah, but looking forward to it.
Yay! So yeah, we have plenty of events to be able to get into for this week, and so let's go ahead and get things started off with our top story for the tech portion of the evening. At least I wanted to be able to cover this because this was actually a big story at E3, and unfortunately, I don't think we actually got to this. Correct me if I'm wrong, but so I wanted to start off with the announcement of the Xbox Adaptive Controller. And again, if we've covered this before, I'm sorry, but I just wanted to cover this again because this actually is pretty awesome tech. The Adaptive Controller is basically meant for people who have limited mobility or accessibility issues, things like that, and it's a controller that not only has kind of a unique setup for it, but has the ability to be custom mapped. So at that point, you can. So I want to be able to put up a screen of this thing really quick, but it's a very unique controller, and I like the fact that it can be custom mapped, which means, let's just say you're playing a game one-armed. You can actually make this controller adaptable to you to be able to play, which is actually something I've always kind of wondered if console companies catered to, for lack of a better term. If they actually did provide stuff like this, I've never seen one in a store, and to my knowledge, this is the first time that's really ever happened.
Yeah, the closest I've seen in history going way back was usually third-party companies making adaptive devices. I know there was one company, I don't think it was Mad Catz, but I think it was a competitor to Mad Catz, that created something similar for the dance pad, where it was basically it took the Dance Dance Revolution pad and made it into a drum.
I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, and so
I can't remember for the life of me who it was, but yeah.
Yeah, and because I remember that's like, oh, for people who can't stand and do DDR, here you can use your arms for DDR, and they were also trying to market it as not just as something for people with disabilities, but they tried marketing it as like a challenge version of, oh, a new fun way to twist. They kind of downplayed the disability
Yep.
accessibility aspect of it.
So for those who are joining us on our live chat, I've actually got a picture up on the screen. This is what the adaptive controller looks like. So you have like the Xbox button, you have the option and the share buttons, as well as a D-pad, but then you also have these big surfaces right here, as well as I believe buttons on the top, which you can just adapt to whatever suits your needs. And I like the fact that it's openly customizable, and it comes with like a from what I understand, not a dictionary type thing, but like a decent sized book to teach you how to use it. So that at that point, anybody can customize these things to fulfill their mobility issues. And that's part of the story. So we've talked about the adaptive controller. They've also announced that when this thing goes live, which I believe is holiday season this year, is when they're going to start.
September is when it's going to come out.
September is when you're going to be able to get that. They've also kind of taken packaging into mind, as you will also have accessible packaging to be able to open this thing up. So for those who don't know what accessible packaging is, it's packaging that's easily removable. Okay, it's got all the tabs and a little, like, for people might know, like across the box, there's just a thing of tape, and usually you just have to cut it off. This thing would come with a tab, so you could pull it straight off to be able to open it up.
And loops, and basically, and I kind of like how the article itself explains how they've adapted a quote-unquote no teeth standard for the design.
Yes.
Because people who have limited mobility will often resort to using their teeth to open packages. And the cool thing is, and this is just more open disclosure, I have a relative who actually helped demo this at E3. He's actually pretty higher up. If you actually type in the accessible controller into Google image search, you'll actually see his picture in one of the promo things. And he helped design it because his left hand doesn't have all the fingers. And so he was actually brought on to help design and present the adaptive controller. He was on the stage at the press show. My siblings were kind of going crazy. And so it's fascinating just how Microsoft is kind of going above and beyond, not just with creating this adaptive controller, but making sure that the packaging can be opened by their intended customer base, which is a big deal.
Dude, to me, like, this is actually one of the highlights of E3. It's like, I've always kind of wondered, like I said, I've always kind of wondered if companies had some kind of a solution to a lot of this stuff. It doesn't sound to me like they really did. And this is the answer. And therefore, like, I mean, does this open up a whole new big demographic for them? Not really. It opens up probably a fairly small demographic, but it's still opening up that demographic for Xbox users only.
Well, yeah, and it shows that, hey, it kind of shows that there's more of a market share to be had. I mean, especially when you consider, and this is from my own personal opinion, when you consider how hard it is to find games that allow you to change settings just to play left-handed. I mean, you look at DS games or computer games or a lot of games that don't even have settings for people who are left-handed. The fact that Microsoft is going above and beyond to create something like this shows, hey, they actually care about making sure that more and more people can play the games that they offer, and, well, that speaks volumes.
Yeah, exactly. No, I really like it, but we just barely actually got a question, which is a good one. So I want to actually get into this. So do the game developers actually get in on this for the customized stuff, or how does this actually get done? So the developers that put in the games for Xbox, they have those mappings already put into the way that the controller is supposed to do it. So like if your A button is supposed to be jump, it's A. So what this controller basically does is it's not involved with the devs at all. They take that mapping and they say, okay, you can put A right here, you can put B right here, and the game will know this is how you respond with A. This is how you respond with B, kind of thing. And it will instinctively still run the tutorials the way that it was meant to run them. So at that point, it's not necessarily a dev thing. This is cooler because it's a hardware end. Hence why I like it. Guy, for lack of a better term, like, people might not necessarily like a manual that's like yay thick, but when you have no other option, this is how you can play games. That's helpful, and people will read this to be able to customize it to the best of their ability, so that they can try games like Fortnite, and they can eventually customize it to the best of their mobility to be able to do just as well. You could literally see players that are one-armed or one-legged or no armed. Like, I don't know if you guys have actually seen videos like this, but I've actually seen a guy play a game with his feet. This guy could map it, and he could be like the best player ever.
Yeah, I mean, when you consider some of the fighters you've seen at EVO, there was one Street Fighter player who's blind and uses the audio to determine the location of his character.
That was cool, too.
Yeah, and so, like, I mean, this opens up a whole bunch of other possibilities. For all we know, we'll probably have a bunch of really impressive fighting game players coming up at the next EVO with this type of controller.
Well, and I think they also, correct me if I'm wrong, he had to have, like, really sound-sensitive headphones so that he could hear the audio for it?
It wasn't so much sound-sensitive headphones. Part of it is that they had to make sure that the game they were playing had this specific audio codec.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, because the game itself, it was like a codec that's used in the arcade cabinets, and they had to make sure it had that specific codec, so that way it would have the surround sound system, so that he could tell which character he was playing. I just have to, because the main thing I have to wonder with that player is that his main was Ken. What did he do if he ever was going up against another Ken player?
Yeah, I mean, but at the same time, like, I'm still going to applaud him. Like, he found a way to be able to play this game and play it to the best of his ability. But I mean, if you master Ken, you could pretty much master Ryu at that point. I think there would just be some minor differences. But the other thing that's cool, I don't know if people know this, like, not only can you map these controllers, you can customize this thing in a lot of different ways to be able to accommodate for you. All right. Because not only are there like buttons on the back, I believe, but there are going to be ports for other add-ons to be able to be put into this for added mobility. So I like the fact that they've done this. I also like the fact that they've made accessible packaging. This is really awesome for Xbox to be able to do it, especially considering that this is not going to be catering to a huge demographic. This is something that they're doing, even though it might be a loss for them overall to be able to do it. Alex, what's your take on the accessibility controller?
I think it's really nice for Microsoft to invest in something like this. Yeah, it's probably it's gonna be a bit of a loss, and price tag aside, I think it will probably just be kind of a loss, but it's something that they want to do to ideally make it as sort of a loss leader to get more people into the Xbox, more people to play their games, and just overall, just do something good and something nice. And I wish we could have this kind of packaging for everything. I mean, anybody who's ever had to open those terrible plastic cases of stuff,
you can, but it just costs more.
Yeah, still, it's just really obnoxious. So,
yeah, I mean, especially when you get the scissors to open that packaging and it comes in that packaging.
Oh, my wife gets mad at me because like my family gave up scissors a long time ago. We just went with the steak knives. And so at that point, like, she got mad because, we bought when we were brand spanking married, like, we had brand spanking new steak knives that I was using to open up packages from Amazon. She's like, stop that. And finally, what we had to do is I had to take one of our old steak knives from where we were living previously. And I'm like, this is my letter opener. Okay. I'm not going to be able to do things the way you want me to. I'm not going to go out and get a box cutter where my daughter can hurt herself. This is my letter opener. Deal with it. Just like now there's this really, really old steak knife that is only used for opening up UPS packages.
Yeah.
That's how it works in my family.
Well, yeah, I'm just talking more like the annoying plastic that you have to like cut. Because there was literally, I was at a Smith's one day where they were selling the scissors meant to cut that really difficult plastic packaging, and it came in that very difficult plastic packaging.
I'm immediately reminded of the what's bullshit, because guys, that packaging is everywhere, and it's and one of the things that annoys me the most is that that's always involved with electronic stuff. It doesn't matter what it is; it's always involved there. And so at that point, you will literally wreck scissors, you will wreck knives, you will wreck a lot of things on that plastic.
You'll wreck your hands.
You will wreck your hands.
You'll wreck your hands. You'll wreck your teeth.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I wouldn't even recommend doing it with teeth because that stuff's sharp enough that I think it could actually impale you.
Yeah, not for the hard plastic, but I've resorted to using my teeth to get off the really thin cellophane plastic, like on, like when back in the day when you like bought old like camera tapes and that, when they're like wrapped in that, or CDs when they're wrapped in that really thin cellophane plastic. It's so annoying.
One of the things that actually got on people's nerves when I would work with them is one of my bad habits is that I don't necessarily clip my nails as much as possible, but I always leave one a little bit more sharp than the others. And like, why on earth do you do that? Because I don't like dealing with the wrapping. And that's always been my answer to it, is like, that's usually like the finger that I go, okay, let's open this up. And then at that point, eventually I kind of clip the nail. But it's like, you guys don't realize until it's gone how helpful that is, especially with like DVD wrappings, Blu-ray wrappings.
Yep.
Yeah, it's very helpful.
And for all the reasons and more is why Microsoft created the adaptive packaging. Bringing them full circle.
Exactly. So congrats on you, Microsoft. This is actually an amazing idea. And you know what? Nintendo and Sony, you need to follow suit on this.
Take notes, people.
Take notes.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing. Just because you're bringing in somebody who has limited mobility doesn't mean they're going to be a Halo fan. Okay? And therefore, you need to be able to, Sony and Nintendo, you are missing out on something right here, because you might actually have a game they want and they have no way to play it.
Yeah, and that's something I've noticed in general. There's like this mentality, because creating adaptive devices, that's something a lot of American companies do. American companies offer those accommodations, but a lot of the Japanese companies tend to not do that. That's something that I've noticed is a bit of a pattern.
No, I mean, it was one of those things where, and to this day, people don't understand why I applauded Sony when they made that wired controller that was made for kids. Have you seen how small my kids' hands are? That's built for them so that they can be able to do that. That was an awesome thing. And I actually got crap for that on the internet. Just going, how could you support this? It's wired. How on earth can you support going backwards in technology? No, I am applauding this because it's allowing for my expensive $70 controller right here to not be destroyed by my toddler.
Yeah, but here's the thing, though.
I love my toddler.
Sony themselves weren't making those controllers. That was a third-party company, and that's the difference.
Yeah, so I mean, you've hit the nail on the head. So it's one of those things where Sony, Nintendo get on this, or third parties get the frick on this.
Yeah. I mean, although to Nintendo's credit a little bit here, while it was never like made for the mass market like this is, I do know of I don't remember exactly what it was called, but I do know of a Nintendo built kind of device to get that kids staying in hospitals could use. It was way back for the GameCube era, and it was really just made for kids in Japan hospitals. So, I said, not a mass market thing like what we're seeing with the Xbox adaptability controller, but Nintendo's kind of dabbled in this a little bit to their credit.
What I'm just trying to say here on this is, like, you have things like Labo now. This is definitely something that don't get me wrong, I like the concept of Labo, but this is also something that you could be catering to Nintendo, because that's an entire, like you just said, Alex, there's a lot of kids in hospitals that are looking for something to do. This would help them. Kind of thing.
And even going it further, there's also just cases, I mean, another common thing I've noticed when people are playing games is like, having settings for people who are colorblind. Yep. I mean, I've heard that is a common problem with gaming as well. Granted, the first time I've heard of it was when someone made a joke about Mass Effect 3's ending, but that's also a key problem where, if you're colorblind and the way certain colors are lined up could make it almost impossible, if not super difficult, to understand what you're seeing on the heads-up display, and having those settings that allow you to compensate for that.
I know like 2 or 3 people who are colorblind, but they both kind of have they have kind of the similar one where they can't see. I think it's reds or greens is the ones that they can't see. And I played WoW with them, and actually they were part of my raid team for a while. And as soon as WoW implemented the colorblind mode, that was amazing to actually hear from their perspective. I'm like, oh, we didn't even know you were colorblind. And it's like, oh yeah, now we can see so many new colors in the scale of this game. And it's like reopen the game to us.
Yeah, and so it just goes to show that ensuring that accessibility is I mean, it may be expensive, it may even be a bit of a loss, but it shows, hey, that's how you build good faith in your customers, is the fact that if you show you're willing to accommodate, as opposed to basically waiting until it becomes a problem, that's a case of, hey, it shows that this company actually knows what the hell it's doing.
That's entirely right. All right, well, I think we pretty much hit the nail on the head, so let's go ahead and move on into the next story that we have. And this one is from way back in the Radio SLCC days, because back in those days, when we just barely had started, we covered the upcoming Sly Cooper movie, which we had gotten a trailer for, which was supposed to be coming out in 2016. spoiler alert, there was a video game movie that came out in 2016. It was just Ratchet and Clank, not Sly Cooper. And I remember that one of our panelists at the time, Aldo Gomez, was actually kind of excited with a Sly Cooper movie, so much so that it actually caused the raccoon kind of meme for the years that followed. Well, the movie is kind of kaputs. We've kind of gotten that confirmed, but we have another cool announcement, which is a Sly Cooper TV show that's going to be done, and it's going to be done in the same CG style that the movie was supposed to be done in, at least to my knowledge. Like, we haven't seen any new models for Sly, Murray, or Bentley in that. But it looks like this is actually going to be debuting October of 2019. Now, we know who's making it, which was Technicolor Animation Productions. Oddly enough, the same studio that worked on Sonic Boom. But we don't necessarily know where this is going. I tried to look around for it to see like which network is picking it up. Is Netflix picking it up? I couldn't find that out. But it's still cool that Sly Cooper is going to be making his way to a screen of sorts, except this time it's going to be in a TV format, which probably would have lent itself better to how Sly Cooper works. I don't know. I'm actually going to move this over to you guys. I know Aldo was a Sly Cooper fan. I'm not sure. Romney, were you one?
Yeah, I was really excited when I saw the trailer when it first came out, and I was excited that it looked like they at least understood the characters and understood kind of what made it work. And honestly, I'm kind of with you. Doing it as a TV show may be a bit of a better fit when you consider that Sly Cooper, this would basically, I mean, the best comparison is that this would be like a kid-friendly version of Lupin the Third, because you just basically you would basically just have a heist of the week. And I mean, Carmelita Fox is basically as close to a Zenigata as you can get.
Pretty much.
So it's very much, hey, this actually is a premise that lends itself to an episodic format very well. It could also work as a film, because again, Lupin was able to make that jump. So
yeah, but this could establish Sly, and then later on they could do a film.
Possibly. I think they're playing it safe, considering that Ratchet and Clank did not do well at the box office. It did not really find that audience. Probably didn't help that they had released the game that told the same story, thus killing any incentive to actually go out and watch the movie, and vice versa, anyone seeing the movie not having incentive to play the game. And so it was a case of where here I can see they're scaling it back a bit and thinking, okay, well, we don't want to sink so much into making a feature-length film that will bomb, so let's do... And it's like, oh, well, Sonic Boom did marginally well, despite its flaws. It's still considered a moderate success. The game's not so much, but the TV show has performed fairly well. So naturally, the studio also has a lot of good faith with video game companies. And so naturally, Sony would be like, okay, well, they handled Sonic pretty well. Let's give them Sly Cooper. It's also anthropomorphized. They can probably do something cool with it.
And I'll even admit that the Sonic Boom series, what little I saw of it, because, you know, as soon as Cartoon Network made a lot of the dumb decisions they did, I was like, well, this is a dead show walking, and kind of didn't watch the rest. But I never hated the animation. I actually thought it was pretty good. So I like the idea that they're going to be taking on Sly Cooper when they already have kind of that established rep with Boom.
Yeah.
Before people jumped down my throat, they did not make Rise of Lyric, so that's why I'm saying they have a good reputation. The series was perceived well. The games were the ones that had the problem. So at that point, like, I love the idea that they're going to take on Sly Cooper. Now, Alex, I already know, because we've already gotten requests for the Sly Cooper series on Drac and Shadow. Where's your standing on it? Because I don't believe you actually played Sly Cooper.
No, I have not played Sly Cooper. I missed out on pretty much any of the PlayStation mascots, because I never had the original PlayStation. And by the time I got PlayStation 2, the platforming mascot genre was kind of retired for a while. So I'm interested in this. Granted, I kind of imagine, given the studio, it's probably going to be a lot like Sonic Boom. It's going to be that mix of short-form comedy with some action. But I might give it a shot. I'll have to keep my eyes out for it.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, Sly Cooper lends itself really well to that sort of thing. I mean, when you look at the way the games play, they definitely skew younger, but they still have kind of that edge to it. It would be kind of like almost if in an ideal world where money was no object, it would be the best comparison for the overall tone of the games would be like Batman the Animated Series, but skewing younger. So almost kind of like a mix of the Sonic Sat AM with Batman the Animated Series, where it has that kind of noir, old-style film aesthetic, but still skewing younger. It's still keeping things age-appropriate, even though they do deal with things like death, when you consider Sly's backstory and how he was orphaned at a young age because of the villain Clockwork looking for the Thievius Raccoonus,
which I have a feeling is going to get brought up in some form here.
I mean, honestly, that could even be like the premise of the first season, is them trying to find the pages of the Thievius Raccoonus, or it could even just be, because again, given how much time it's been since the first game, they could even just be a case of, okay, well, let's go back to their early days when Sly, Bentley, and Murray are just starting their thieving operations before Sly has come into his own as a master thief.
Yeah, again, and then have Clockwork kind of come into the mix.
Well, and you don't even necessarily need Clockwork. Like, I mean, I keep comparing it to Lupin because it's the closest comparison, where you don't even necessarily have to adhere to the canon of the games. You just have the set basic premise, and then you can just kind of play around with it. You don't have to necessarily use established villains. You can create new characters and new villains, and just, again, much like Lupin, you don't have to tether yourself to any set canon. It's just, oh, here's something that they want to steal. Here's how they do it.
Yeah, here's the basis. Is like, you know, where we have a lot of series that are monster of the day, this could be heist of the day. Just like looking to get this item so that we can establish reputation for Sly Cooper. But I will admit, like in later seasons, when they get things established, it would be cool to be able to see some of the other characters I've heard have spawned throughout the series. So you had Carmelita Fox, who's the opposition, but then you also have a bunch, basically a cast and crew of characters that could easily be brought into this format for comedic purposes.
Yeah, I mean, over time, he pretty much establishes a full-on rogues gallery, and by the time of the third game, specifically, the third game was where it was going for like a full homage to Ocean's 11, where the first game, you play primarily as Sly, except for the 2 levels where you play as Murray and Bentley. The second game is basically you're playing between the 3 of them, and then the third game is where you're doing the Ocean's 11 thing, getting a full team together, working with different characters to pull off the grand heist. Yeah. And then a Thieves in Time kind of happened, and the canon started getting mixed up.
Weird.
But then that's what happens when you throw in time travel. Things get
weird. Once you throw in the wibbly wobbly timey wimey, you can't take it back. You can't put that back in the box at that point.
Yeah. So honestly, this would probably even be a good way for them to do a soft reboot as well. Thinking, okay, enough time has passed. Let's reboot it, start from the beginning, and then.
Would this also be an interesting way to be able to reintroduce people to the franchise? And then, because I know Sucker Punch is working on Ghost of Tsushima right now, but I think Sucker Punch is big enough where they can work on 2 games at a time. And I've always kind of wondered if Sly 5 has ever been on their radar, if they've ever been interested in doing it.
I've heard rumors that they've been wanting to do it, especially given it's just Sony's kind of in an interesting place, because I know that they wanted to try to reestablish some mascots, especially after, like, because they were hoping to do it with PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale, but, well, everyone saw it for the Smash clone that it was, and it probably didn't help that they got the bad Dante and Raiden, but it's also a case where Sony is kind of not really sure what they want to do and who they really want to appeal to, and that's kind of half their problem. And so something like this, where it's like, okay, we take these characters that Sony owns, we reboot this series as a TV show, and if we get enough fervor from the TV show, then it may not even necessarily be Sucker Punch. Sony could just be like, okay, we'll outsource this to another studio, since Sucker Punch is busy with Ghost of Tsushima or other AAA projects. It could be a case of, okay, well, let's maybe find a smaller studio that specializes in these kid-friendly titles like Sanzaru Games, which, yes, they did work on Sonic Boom for the DS, but they still have a bit of... Their track record is a case where, okay, for kid-friendly games, they're established. They're not the greatest, but at least it's not as bad as Rise of Lyric. That's kind of the general consensus, and so that I can see that being Sony's direction, where they let the TV show establish and build up hype, and then then using that metric, they develop smaller games that are basically meant to be stocking stuffers, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, I mean, like Sony does have a little bit of the mascot problem, but at the same time, I would also say that they do have established mascots. It's just, unfortunately, fandoms are not sure if they like them or not. Because Ratchet and Clank, I think they still consider to be a mascot. I think they still consider Sly to be a mascot.
Yeah, and then there's also Sackboy.
Sackboy is one, but we had Little Big Planet 3 a while ago, and I actually think the Media Molecule is moving on to other stuff.
Yeah,
and I'm gonna say it, even though a lot of people don't want to acknowledge it. Knack is a mascot for them. They have 2 games with him thus far, and from what I understand, there's a 3rd on the way.
Well, yeah.
So Knack is another.
Well, then you also have Jack and Daxter as kind of one of the other characters they like to bring in, and arguably you could even say that Kratos is also a mascot for Sony as well.
Yeah, because he's exclusive. I mean, I know a lot of people would like to bring up that Crash and Spyro are PlayStation mascots. I can't make that assessment anymore, and it's just because of the fact that if the Reignited trilogy and the Insane trilogy were only on Sony consoles, I'd say, okay, that's fine. But they're not. They're on Xbox and they're also on Nintendo. So it's hard to make that justification anymore.
Well, yeah, and Sony has
I mean, another mascot would be Nathan Drake.
Yeah, exactly. I was about to mention that because Sony has a sizable cast of characters that are exclusive to the console, and I think that's half their problem. They haven't really put any power behind any one, except for maybe Kratos, but just because, well, God of War had that big enough of a draw, but, well, Kratos ain't exactly kid-friendly, and that's the problem.
Kratos, and I would also say Nathan Drake in previous years have gotten kind of that funding, and that's why Knack was supposed to be kind of that experiment to bring mascots back, and unfortunately people kind of, well, shat on Knack, and I still, to this day, do not understand why, because Knack is just as cute and cuddly as any of the other mascots you would have liked.
Yeah, I think part of the problem is that they're trying to do what Sega did back in the day, where Sega, during the console wars, they tried marketing themselves as the edgier console for older kids, and Sony is trying to have it both ways, where they want the kid-friendly mascot, but also want to market themselves as the cool, edgy, more like teen-oriented console company, and you just can't have it both ways. You got to kind of find a niche and stick to it. What's
funny is like a lot of people have been asking me if the demographics have changed since previous gen, because I've gone on this podcast and a number of others saying that the way that it worked is the adult gamers were more inclined to go, like, if you were an adult and strictly gaming on adult stuff, you were going Xbox. If you were kids and families, you were going Nintendo, and everything in between was going Sony, because everything just kind of, Sony was like that gray area where everything just kind of worked.
Yeah.
So at that point, I think that ultimately is kind of a thing that hurts Sony. I also think it's Sony's greatest strength is that they kind of bridge a lot of people together.
Yeah, kind of the way I always viewed it is that you had Xbox was kind of the mainstream American console. Nintendo, like, to use TV networks, Xbox was basically NBC, where it has programs that everybody can enjoy at some point throughout the day. Nintendo is very much Disney Channel, geared strictly towards younger audiences, whereas Sony, the way I see it, Sony I kind of viewed as they kind of situated themselves as kind of the Ion, but also the Funimation of the gaming world, where it's like, okay, well, we have these like syndicated franchises that anyone can gravitate towards, but then they also started catering towards the niche markets, like the RPG markets and a lot of those specific niche fan bases, especially when you consider all of their consoles, starting with the PS3, were region free. Well, there were importers that would buy their console.
And what I was trying to point out also is that, you know, like, that was the previous generation's demographics. They really haven't changed here. I mean, Xbox has opened themselves up more to a family kind of demographic, but they still skew towards adult gamers, and they know that that's where their money is. Sony still kind of hits that gray territory, but tries to be like, depending on the years, sometimes they tend to be more family friendly and sometimes they tend to be more hardcore. And then Nintendo still caters to families and kids. So at that point, like, the demographics really haven't changed. And I kind of get the point that, like, where people think there's too many mascots, there's too much saturation with Sony, ergo we can't make a decision with them. I also I think it's their greatest strength, because they are probably if you're going to gateway drug anybody into gaming, Sony's the way to do it.
True. But Sony hasn't been making it easy as of late as well.
No, they haven't in most recent years, no.
I mean, especially when you consider the fact that, I mean, how bad do you have to screw up when Microsoft and Nintendo are coming together to point out how you're screwing up with crossplay? That is like, I mean, I look at that trailer.
Nope, that's on them. That's entirely on them.
Yeah, that's entirely on Sony. I'm just like, okay, they really have to kind of look, and there's like, we literally had two of our biggest rivals come together to point and laugh at us. What did we do wrong?
And might I point out that these two wouldn't normally come together at all. It would be more likely for Nintendo and Sony to come together because, again, Japanese companies.
Yeah, but when you consider the history between Sony and Nintendo and how Nintendo was going...
Oh, yeah, no. Excluding that.
Yeah, like...
But also, like, the history between Microsoft and Nintendo, it's not all that great either.
Yeah, but I get the feeling Sony still carries that grudge when you consider a lot of the decisions they make to spite Nintendo. And it's very much, Sony still very much carries that grudge from when Nintendo burned them and went over to Philips.
Yes, because a lot of people still remember that. All right, well, final thoughts on the Sly Cooper TV series. I'm excited for this. I just wish I knew where it was going. That's my only complaint.
Looking at this, my guess is they're probably doing what Saban used to do back in the day, where they're maybe developing this specifically for syndication. Instead of finding any one network, it'll be given how many episodes they've already announced, that's probably the way they're going, or it could just be a case they're waiting to shop it around. I mean, networks that could pick this up, considering that the first season is going to have like 52 episodes, I can see them trying to take this to the hub. Nickelodeon, maybe, but they would probably tell them to chop it in half. But at the very least, it means we wouldn't have a second season called Super Sly Cooper.
Or they could just say the first one is Sly Cooper, and then, like halfway into the series, they start adding subtitles, which would be "and the Thievius Raccoonus," and actually go into.
But see, Adam,
like Band of Thieves and all that.
Yeah, but you see, Adam, that actually makes sense.
This is true. Alex, final thoughts on this one. Are you excited for Sly Cooper?
Like I said, I'm interested. I'm a little curious. I'll just need to wait and see a little bit more before I can totally say I'm on board.
We might need to get into this game series before that comes out so that we can give our opinions on the series. I'm pointing that out there. So let's go ahead and move on into the next story, so Alex brought this up. And I'm going to blame this on Alex because as soon as I saw this, I had to venture further. And the more I got weirded out, the more I'm like, yes, I have to read this live. So I actually put in our agenda, like, Alex, we need to have a talk, and we'll have that talk after I read this description live. So there's a brand new dating sim on Kickstarter that's looking to get a whopping $54,000, and it's already almost $7,000 to that goal. And it's a little unusual, as it is being called, and I'm not even kidding you guys, the Super Patriotic Dating Simulator. I'm just going to let that sink in for a second. The Super Patriotic Dating Simulator. Already I can feel like a bunch of you guys have questions, so let me go ahead and read this. Read actually what is Super Patriotic Dating Simulator. So it's being made from a developer called Carly Asmiley, I think is how you say it.
Actually, the studio is called Immigrant Father Studios, and the main person is named Carly Asmiley.
Yeah, so she is the founder of Immigrant Father Studios. I am an Iranian-American person, and I wrote a video game to express all my complex feelings towards America, the Middle East, and my clitoris. I'm going to have to bleep stuff out this time around, aren't I? I'm proud to present the Super Patriotic Dating Simulator. The Super Patriotic Dating Simulator, try and say that 3 times fast, by the way, is a satirical visual novel. You play as Elodie, a 19-year-old CIA super spy. As one of America's most ruthless agents, you've been assigned a deadly solo mission. Infiltrate and destroy I blank. We kind of get where they're going, but it's been blanked out. Besides the whole super spy thing, you're just a normal American girl who's really horny.
Jesus.
Give these effers an American ass kicking and maybe learn a bit about your body on the way. Just remember the number 1 rule of the CIA. Always ask for consent. I just read that description verbatim, people. I just gave you a line read that they would probably want advertised for it. So yes, you play as Elodie, who is basically trying to date. I have to go into the names because Jiminy Christmas. You have 7 dating options. You have the Caliph, Husani, Omar, Yasir, Sadiq, and General Rashad, General Wasim, and those are all of them. So yes, basically you're a CIA agent who is trying to woo, for lack of a better term, Muslims. And that's the premise of this dating simulator that is supposed to be satirical and but it does actually incorporate 7 different dateable characters, each with multiple character endings, a geopolitical intrigue, beautiful illustrations at high tension moments, 1 horse. I don't know why that's an advertisement, but it is. Helpful reminders for white people that blank is not representative of Islam or all Middle Eastern people. Okay, let's actually get it. So I have a couple of questions on this one, but let's go ahead and get into this. So this is supposed to be a spoof of dating sims.
Yes. And visual novels in general.
Visual novels in general, but also, as she points out, it's also supposed to be satirical about her complex feelings towards America, the Middle East, and I'm not adding that last one. I don't want to have to bleep again. But so you have all of this stuff. I'm just going to go ahead and go into my more complex question. Last I checked, dating sims do not take that much money. Okay, they're actually pretty easy to be able to put out as long as you know the artist and all that stuff. Why are we asking for $54,000 for it?
Well, looking at what they explain here, it says that the budget is going towards creating the art assets, and that seems to be the case. So it's going towards specifically art, music, and development. Since apparently the script is fully written, it's just basically going into the actual making of the game itself.
Yeah, so at that point, that tells me, okay, you don't have a coder. You don't have an artist to be like, you might have had an artist to be able to do all of this stuff, but to do all of the endings and all of the various animations for Elodie as well as any of the other guys.
Yeah, especially when
you don't have that.
Especially when you consider that it sounds like they may be going to develop their own engine instead of using a pre-established engine like RenP, for example.
No, yes. According to the FAQ, they are using RenP, so
again, that's a cost-cutting measure. Why are they asking for $54,000?
I really don't know either.
Yeah.
I don't look. I've never built a visual novel myself. There are people who could do this in their basements, but there are a few artists attached to it. According who's making this
you're not wrong. I've seen dating sims that were built by some dude in his basement in his spare time. I mean, I don't know if you've actually ever seen this, but there's John Cena Simulator. That didn't look like it was built with that much like high intensity work.
Yeah. Exit Mothership, Linda Chun, Andrew Weiler for video production. So 2 background artists, a video producer, Lauren Gallagher for logo design, and David Waymer for UI design. So they have a few people, but yeah, the really expensive budget does have me a bit puzzled. I wouldn't think a simple visual novel would cost this much.
This actually makes me wonder, like, how much
unless they're planning to have
budgets for some of the more popular dating sims are.
Unless they're planning to have it like fully voice acted, then I could see it. There's nothing that indicates it is going to be, but there's nothing that says it's not. So it's not
even a goal to get it voice acted. So at that point, I hate to be that guy, but I'm not aiming for that either. I don't think that they're looking to have it voiced over. So that would explain a lot of that budget, and it's not there. So my only guess is that because I see a UI designer and I see a logo design, I don't see what I would consider to be aside from Carly, an actual coder for this. I know that she's the creator, the writer, and they've also got her as the programmer. Okay. And if she's going to use the Ren'Py engine, then she's fine with it. But that's the only way that I can justify this is like the artists and the and also the music person is not in there either.
Yeah,
the music production person isn't in there.
Yeah, mainly because the music production is listed as somewhat as an unofficial stretch goal. It says if we hit the funding goal of $54,000, we'll add an original soundtrack by Kitty, which is the name of the composer. And so maybe that's what the high budget is going for, is that they're trying to hire the composer so they'll actually have music. And
so at that point, the thing that surprises me is like those additional goals are stuff that you can put out additionally in your stretch goals. Why is this the base goal of the Kickstarter? Because I think that's a little bit of a false advertising. Do you get what I mean, guys? Is like you could put that as a stretch goal and you could put the actual price in as what it is. So like, let's just say, this is asking for $10,000. Okay. Then at that point you could have 6,900 out of 10,000 and people would actually probably get a little bit more optimistic and want to pay for it. Unlike this one where it looks like that's way too much money to ask for. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I actually think that asking for that 54,000 goal in your initial Kickstarter is actually hurting the prospect here. Just a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, especially considering that this is Kickstarter, where it's an all-or-nothing system as opposed to Indiegogo, where you would have a as much as you can raise sort of thing. And so that does raise those concerns as well, as why didn't they bring this over to Indiegogo, where you could have a flexible goal?
I'm just trying. What's a popular dating sim?
Clannad is really popular. And like I said, games like Clannad, those are like fully voice worked, and they generally have some pretty.
Okay, I don't want to aim for one that's. I don't want to aim for one that's voiced over. I'm talking about like. So, for example, do we have like actual budgets on like say the hidden the normal boots one? Do we actually have a budget for that?
I have no idea.
Or Honey Pop, like because I know Honey Pop is out there as a dating sim, and even though that one's kind of voiced. So that's probably not a good example, but it would. I'm just curious, what is an actual budget for a dating sim?
Yeah, and
your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah, well, to kind of correct,
because I look at them and I go, that's not much.
Well, yeah, to kind of correct, Honey Pop is fully voiced, not partly. It actually is fully voiced.
Oh, I thought that there were still lines that weren't voiced.
No, at least the most current release, it's fully voiced.
Okay, so at that point, that's a bad example. But yeah, like. I don't know, because I only know the ones that get brought to me, like Sakura Spirit, and I think
Doki Doki Literature Club.
Literature. I don't want to go for Literature Club because Literature Club is a dating sim with a twist.
Well, not even just that. It's not even like a full dating sim. It's more or less it's basically a high concept demo.
Yeah, pretty much. So at that point, it's not necessarily a worthwhile example, but I look at dating sims and I literally look at them and I go, that can't cost much to be able to do. That's probably like ideal for somebody who's looking to get into indie to start out and be able to do it.
I mean, especially when you consider the level of tiers as well, where the lowest tier to get any rewards is $15, and then you have the $25 tier, and then you have the $5,000 tier,
which is to be in the game. So paying $5,000 gets you into this game. So what? You're an extra person that they can date.
Not quite. It's kind of like the Kojima rescue mission in the Phantom Pain, where you basically you have a fictional version of yourself that the main character has to rescue at some point.
Then at that point, I would say, is that worth $5,000? Might not be.
Well, considering that people donated,
I mean, the Kojima thing in Phantom Pain, yes, that is, but this, not really.
But again, considering that people were willing to pay to a potato salad Kickstarter, anything's possible.
Oh, don't remind me of that damn Kickstarter. Oh, jeez. Yeah, I just look at this and I go, there's no possible way that this could be as expensive as $54,000. Now, do I think this is actually okay? Let's actually get into this prospect. Okay, do we think this is offensive? Do we think this is actually a good idea? I'm going to say, given what I know about it thus far, yes, it's satirical. I don't see this going over well in today's climate, but it is satirical. I don't know. Where are you guys at with it?
Honestly, it's looking at it, it's a case of it's doing what good art should do, where it makes it asks questions. I mean, to borrow a phrase from the animated series Duckman, comedy should leave you different from the way it found you. And that's what this is that it's basically someone who has these complex feelings, being of Iranian descent, but growing up in the United States. It's channeling that into something productive and basically it reminds me a lot of the South Park episode, Osama bin Laden is a doo-doo head, and kind of just the mentality that that episode came from shortly after 9/11. This is more or less coming from that same energy. It's not like, oh, we're out to completely satirize or demonize. It's just a case of, hey, let's poke fun at how ridiculous this situation has become. Yeah. And especially considering how they're pointing out the fact that, hey, it is kind of ridiculous how people have kind of demonized it, which is something South Park did with that episode, where it's doing what satire is supposed to do, where it's pointing out kind of the ridiculousness of it. But again, there's a lot of cases like you said, the budget raises a lot of questions. It kind of raises the idea of, what if this is nothing more than simply a publicity stunt to raise awareness for the game that they don't even intend to actually raise money? Because we've seen that sort of thing before with Kickstarted projects, that the Kickstarters were started not because they wanted funding, but because they wanted to gauge interest. Case in point, Shenmue 3.
Yeah, so, I mean, at that point, like, I agree with you. It should come out, okay? I don't care about the controversy. I don't care about who this is going to offend, because as the Duckman quote says, this should leave you differently than how it found you, kind of thing. So at that point, I'm not saying that it shouldn't come out. I actually think I just think it'll have problems when it comes out, because not everybody is me. Not everybody is Romney in this regard. Alex, what about you? Do you think that this should come out?
Yeah, I think it should come out. This is probably not a project I'm going to run out to invest in or buy when it does. I do like some of the concepts. I like the idea that the creator wants to satirize some of the more current events out there and sort of how we all kind of look at things. It's the nature of comedy. You want to kind of push some buttons, so like that. So to that, of course, I agree. It's something that should come out, but there is so many questions to be had when it comes to the idea of this Kickstarter and probably a few other things. I suppose I could get on Kickstarter and like ask a question, because there is an ask question function. Maybe I'd get a reply. It's just asking for a budget breakdown if they'd be willing to share, but I don't know. So
yeah, that's my biggest problem here is the budget that they're asking for. It doesn't justify here.
Yeah.
At least for initial release. I mean, if you want to keep the Kickstarter, or here's a better answer. Like, as soon as this game comes out, if you want to do a GoFundMe with these goals in mind, then go do it. But the problem is that your initial Kickstarter goal is $54,000.
Yeah, although technically their goal, like the $54,000 is the stretch goal. Their official goal is $42,069 is the official goal on Kickstarter.
So actually, I think because it's saying of the blank goal. So at that point, it's actually subtracting it out. So at that point, like they still have $54,000 as the goal.
I see. The website is confusing.
Yeah. So at that point, like the goal here should be something more along the lines of, again, I don't know the actual funding for a dating sim, but I'd say I'll be overly optimistic here. $7,500 to $10,000. Okay. $7,500 to $10,000. So you'd be almost there. But the fact that you've added that in just makes me kind of sit there and question. The other thing that I also find out that I just barely noticed, so they bleep out, okay, for those who are wondering why I bleeped it out, it's because it's actually bleeped out in the description. Yes, you have to infiltrate and destroy ISIS. One of the other things I find funny here, I don't know if you guys noticed this on the Kickstarter page, she blocks out ISIS in the description, but when you look at the descriptions of the guys, she doesn't bleep it out. So I'll show you guys really quick. So on my screen, here we go. There it is. Head of ISIS. I thought we weren't supposed to say ISIS.
It may be a search engine optimization thing where maybe they're blocking it out so it doesn't pull it up in the text.
It could be, but it's just like, I mean, this is a good satirical idea.
Yeah.
I actually do find it funny that the Iranian American woman, because the allegory here for her is Elodie, the way I understand it.
And yeah,
but she made herself a white CIA agent.
Well, yeah, looking at it, it's not even just in the character description. It's even in the first screenshot on the Kickstarter page as well, where the name is not bleeped out. So
yeah,
my guess, it's definitely some sort of it's probably an SEO thing where they're not wanting it to come up in any false flags when people are doing Google searches. I mean,
yeah, because like the first screenshot, we approach ISIS headquarters. Yeah, so it's there.
Yeah, I imagine this is so that way we don't get a bunch of right-wing journalist groups picking this up and reporting false information like they did with Mass Effect and
possibly
every single video game under the sun. And so that's probably why.
Yeah.
I'm running out of stuff to say here because, like, I think this is an interesting idea. It actually could be a satire on dating sims. It really could. Not just a satire of what she's trying to go for, and I think it would actually be an interesting satire of dating sims. I mean, if I were to fund a dating sim, probably the first one I'd ever fund would be Doki Doki Literature Club, just in the way that it was built. Just because all of a sudden, you know, you have a sentient AI within the game that tries to kill you, or not tries to kill you, but tries to kill all of her competition. Okay, that's an interesting idea within it. This one, I think, has a lot of great ideas, just based on the fact that it wants to satire this genre. Is it going to go over well? No, but that's why I know that this should come out, is because then at that point we can have it and we can question it, kind of thing. But final thoughts on this one, aside from, if you all think I need to have a serious talk with Alex, then you need to let me know in the comments below.
For the record, I didn't find this. I follow a couple like media news channels that like to cover just whatever's in the media or news or whatever, and they brought this up, so I thought it'd be interesting to bring to Geek News just to talk about it, because it is one of those quirky, weird Kickstarter projects that, you know, just makes you kind of raise your eyebrows and go, what? Also, I love the goals here. It's like pledge $15, you get your game, your name will be listed in the credits. Well, that's pretty standard. Pledge $25 to get your name delisted from the credits. All right, I gotta give it. That's a little bit.
Why?
Dude,
some people do this just because they want their name in the game.
It's true. I mean, it's just one of those weird.
And I love how they justify it. Plus identity protection.
It should be added that this game creator has worked on Cards
it won't be removed. Okay, let's correct this really quick. It won't be removed outright. You will be given the option to opt out for an additional $10. If you just pay $15, you don't get that option, mister. You don't get it. But if you pay that extra $10, you have the option.
That's right.
Maybe this is all just secretly a resume she's submitting to EA.
That too. The other thing that just makes me look at this, and I'll admit it, I looked at it and I went, this is a joke. This is a joke Kickstarter. It has to be a joke. There's no way that this would fly. You have the 54,000. You have the opt-out for your name to be in the credits. How is this not a joke Kickstarter?
That is something to think about. Maybe this is just a joke Kickstarter.
Maybe.
If it is, that's a lot of art to go into a joke. I'm just saying.
Honestly, people have gone to great lengths for the sake of a joke. I mean, need we remind you of the legend of Andy Kaufman?
Oh, jeez.
That's true.
Oh, dude, I'm seeing like some of the video going on of this game. Oh, Jiminy Christmas. This is probably the most suggestive dating sim I've actually seen out there. I mean, granted, I don't play dating sims, but...
As somebody who has played a couple of dating sims, I imagine this one will be on the quote-unquote slightly tamer side, just based on what the FAQ says.
Wait, no. Please, Elodie, grab my manhood. That's subtle?
That's why I put it in massive air quotes, mind you. Slightly tamer side, like essentially the equivalent of an M-rated game.
Oh, Jiminy Chris. Oh man. Okay, so final thoughts on this one. I'm gonna start making fun of it.
Again, I do want to say I don't know. I kind of got cut off last time, but the creator of this Kickstarter did work on Cards Against Humanity, so that might be a bit of a clue into her insight here.
That might be. That might. The base game or the expansions that came out after?
I'm not exactly sure, and her website's not very specific about what she's worked on. I just know that's something that she's done before.
Okay, because last I knew, the Cards Against Humanity people were still kind of together. So
right, I'm guessing probably one of the expansions, but that's as far as I know.
All right, final thoughts, Romney.
Honestly, I think I've pretty much said. I mean, if it is a joke Kickstarter, this is very ambitious. But looking at what she's hoping to explore with it, I can see it going one of two ways. I either see it being a very clever satire, or I see something that is trying to be satire, but is trying to comment on too many things at once. I mean, that's also a possibility because satire is hard. I mean, considering, it's very much, it's about sexuality, but also about my feelings about America and my feelings about ISIS and feelings about this. I'm just like, okay, I mean, unless you can keep all of those things balanced, you're gonna have to strike that nice balance, because that's not as easy to execute as it is to say. Hopefully it'll come together and actually be a strong piece of satire. But again, satire is hard and just very easy to screw up.
Here's a way to be able to tell, and I'm actually going to assign our Geek News audience to be able to do it. Go check fan fiction, and if there's something similar to this that is written like that, then yes, it's a joke. Because that's the only way that I can justify it. Because the way that she's writing about this, the way that the LED character is presented, if there's a fanfic about this, that answers the question.
Well, again, it could go either way. Given how quickly people jump on things, I mean, considering how quickly cosplayers jumped on the trailer for free before it was even announced, when it was just a Kyoto Animation demo, that may not be the best metric.
Yep. So at that point, let's go ahead and move into our top story for the entertainment portion of the evening. So people might remember last week we covered the situation involving James Gunn. For those who don't know that situation, I'll quickly go over it. James Gunn was the director of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. He had actually just barely done a draft for Guardians Volume 3, and his weekend at San Diego Comic-Con was not a pleasant one, as basically a bunch of story ideas and a bunch of tweets that he had done roughly 10 years ago were brought back to light, and they weren't the most pleasant things to read. They were, in some cases, I actually was able to get my hands on those tweets. They were ideas that he was bouncing around, and they were really kind of creepy and weird, for especially if they were going to be like movie or TV series ideas. They were really weird. And unfortunately, they came back to light, and he got, I think, for the lack of a better term, verbally harassed at San Diego Comic-Con, so much so that he was eventually pulled off of some of the other panels he was supposed to go to, and Disney promptly fired him from the director position of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. And when we discussed this last week, people might remember my dissatisfaction with that, because here's another factor that a lot of people don't consider in the story. Roughly about 5 years after that, and roughly about the time when the first Guardians movie was coming out, he apologized for them. He made a formal apology that went out to Twitter and said, yeah, this was a weird phase for me. I know it was creepy. I know it was weird. I'm not that way anymore. And he had already apologized for it. He'd already tried to take care of it, and then Guardians hit, and his star went up in the world. But now he has been fired. However, I'm actually very happy to say that a significant following has shown support for James Gunn, as we have a petition that I believe, Alex, was it you that actually tracked down the petition or the article for it?
Yeah, I found the article.
So we actually found out that, do we have an exact number in the article? Yeah, over 168,000 signatures as of that article were in support of rehiring James Gunn. There's also a significant Twitter and Facebook movement to rehire James Gunn.
Yep, the signature is currently at 326,104 signatures and counting.
That is nuts. And this is to rehire him. and to accept it. Like at that point, like if he needs to make another formal apology to Disney, or on Disney's behalf for the stuff that he did, then I think he'd be willing to do it. But that's a lot of people saying we want him back. Okay. So I'm bringing that up because I found that heartening that a lot of people actually agreed with, because I think that was pretty much our opinion, is like the firing was a little harsh, especially if he'd apologized. So many people agreed with us in that regard. But the other thing that was interesting that happened this week is that another creator found himself in similar hot water. For those who are fans of the Cartoon Network series, or at least the Adult Swim series, Rick and Morty, Dan Harmon is under a similar amount of scrutiny over stuff that he did roughly, let's see, 2009, so it would be 9 years ago. 9 years ago, he submitted an idea for basically a Dexter kind of drama. I'm not going to go into the details of it because it gets kind of creepy, but it was supposed to be like a spoof, it was a spoof
of Dexter.
It was a spoof of Dexter, and already Dexter's kind of a dark a dark kind of series. I think it's supposed to be a dark comedy, isn't it? I have never seen it.
It's kind of in between, where it's both a drama but also a dark comedy, considering the premise. It very much is a dark series.
Yeah. So at that point, Dan Harmon made that before he had made Rick and Morty. And eventually, that never took off or anything like that. And it was forgotten.
He actually took it down.
Yeah, he took it down and then eventually went off and did Rick and Morty. Well, he found himself in hot water because that came back to light. And the only difference in his situation is that Cartoon Network investigated it and found his actions in taking down the video. He even apologized for that. Again, he apologized for it and said this was the problem that he had. He explained the situation, and Cartoon Network sided with him. Let me just say that again. Or is Adult Swim Cartoon Network, or are they separate companies?
They're part of the same company, but
I was going to say, yeah.
Yeah, but Adult Swim it's basically like a separate department within the larger Cartoon Network branch, where it's part of it, but it runs itself.
Yes. So this is officially Adult Swim or Cartoon Network's statement in regards to the Dan Harmon situation. At Adult Swim, we seek out and encourage creative freedom and look to push the envelope in many ways, particularly around comedy. The offensive content of Dan's 2009 video that recently surfaced demonstrates poor judgment and does not reflect the type of content we seek out. And this is from the Adult Swim spokesperson to a CNET article. Dan recognized his mistake at the time and has apologized. He understands there is no place for this type of content here at Adult Swim. He also issued a statement apologizing for the video. This is Dan Harmon. In 2009, I made a pilot which strove to parody the series Dexter and only succeeded in offending. I quickly realized the content was way too distasteful and took the video down immediately. Nobody should ever have to see what you saw, and for that, I sincerely apologize. And the only difference in his situation right now is that the company didn't fire him, they stood with him in that regard. I have a feeling he got internal penalties for it because of the discovery. They probably looked him in the eye and said, are there any other skeletons in your closet that we need to find? And they said, go back to work.
Yep. Here's the thing to keep in mind, though. The difference between Adult Swim and Disney...
Oh, there's lots of differences, but go ahead.
But the main fundamental difference is that Adult Swim establishes itself as an edgier entity. They establish themselves as producing adult comedy that pushes the envelope. And so something like this, if it's like, oh, one of our creators made something that was kind of messed up, well, so do a lot of the people we already hire. In other news, water is wet. Whereas Disney, they're very protective of their family-friendly, squeaky clean image. When you consider some of the really shady stuff Disney has done that they are still trying to make sure nobody remembers, and it's very much a case of, although it was harsh, the fact that Disney fired James Gunn outright doesn't surprise me. It was purely a PR move because they knew that if they kept them on, you were going to get a bunch of angry people like railing against them and boycotting all their movies. And well, although people say any publicity is good publicity, for Disney, bad publicity will still do damage, and they want to get away from that as quickly as possible. Whereas Adult Swim, they're in the position of, hey, we already make edgy stuff. People already know we cater towards adults. We don't have the family-friendly image we need to protect. So this is our stance.
Yeah, I would say another difference, too, is that the way that Cartoon Network and Adult Swim looked at this is, okay, fine. Like, we have so many creators that do stuff like this to try and get noticed, and we understand that. And then Disney, their other approach is like anything negative, they literally look at it and go, this could come back to haunt us, period. We don't even we're not even interested in the what if of this might not come back to haunt us. We're just going to cover the bases anyway, and that's why they went for James Gunn the way they did.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that you're wrong in that, because you're not. That's how Disney is going to approach these things. It's just really sad that where Dan Harmon had a similar situation to this, and the only difference being is that Cartoon Network was more willing to be apologetic in this regard. Disney, not so much.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, there's a line from the movie Saving Mr. Banks that pretty much shows this in full force, where you basically had in the movie, for those of you who don't know, Saving Mr. Banks is the fictionalized telling of the creation of the film Mary Poppins. And partway through the movie, they basically had like, oh, are we inviting the author to the premiere? And Disney's just like, oh, no, because I know that she may start some trouble here, and I have to protect the movie. And that summarizes Disney's MO in a nutshell is, oh, we have to protect the movie. We have to protect our assets and, well, ourselves.
Yeah, it's an effed up situation. In fact, earlier today, our buddy Aldo actually, I'm trying to track it down. Our buddy Aldo actually had a very good tweet on the matter, kind of describing the James Gunn situation. Let me see if I can track it down so I can, hopefully he won't mind if I read it really quick, but I actually felt like he hit the nail on the head of the weirdness of this situation. Here we go. So, a film about characters who have made mistakes in their past, and as they try to move forward to being better people, have come to being better people, have come to terms with their pasts. It's almost like it's a theme based on personal experiences, which is entirely the case here for James Gunn. I would not be surprised if he looked back on the stuff that he was coming up with and went, oh, that's horrible, and I feel bad about it. And that influenced what he was going to do with Guardians of the Galaxy in both of those films. I actually wonder if Volume 3 also had themes like that too.
Likely, but we'll probably never know.
Yeah, because I have a feeling that his treatment is not going to be utilized from here on. So that's another crying, as far as I'm concerned, crying shame. And I really wish that things were different, but hopefully, I've said it numerous times. Petitions don't do as much as people think they do, because PR departments and corporate entities will ignore them. They don't care. But it's one of those things where this is one of those few times where I would say I really hope that somebody takes notice of this. Somebody takes notice of 326,000 people who are pissed off that you fired this guy simply for something that he did 10 years ago and apologized for 5 years after. And would be, and I've actually seen statements from James Gunn. He'd apologize again. So there you go. It's not like I'm expecting an immediate result like that. It would be great if it happened. But I mean, this is also the company that won't listen to the fans that, yes, while it was dumb that they made the whole Declaration of Independence thing, they won't listen to them where they're pissed off at Kathleen Kennedy. It's not possible.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, the only way Disney will listen is if it hurts their wallet. I mean, again, case in point, when both Winnie the Pooh and John Carter tanked, the CEO got fired, not because of anything political. It was a case of, hey, this guy cost us $500 million. Let's can him before he burns our company into the ground.
Yep. Alex, any thoughts on the James Gunn, Dan Harmon situation?
Yeah, I said that last week. I agree. I feel like firing him was just not a good thing, considering it was something dumb he said a decade ago on Twitter. We all know Twitter is the place. I
swear this is going to be a discussion at one point. Is like, is social media actually hurting fandoms?
Yeah.
I even wrote an article about that sort of thing, and so the short answer is yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm wondering if we need to have like a discussion on that, but fans let us know on that.
Yeah.
Anyway, continue, Alex.
But I don't know if this is the most apt comparison, but Disney still works with Tim Allen. Tim Allen, he's voiced Buzz Lightyear, and of course he's on Home Improvement for many years. So now, years ago, like long before he started working with Disney, and even during his tenure with Disney, but long before that start, he got busted for marijuana possession, which
went to jail.
Keep in mind, right? It's not a big thing today, but back then that was a way bigger deal than it is today.
Doesn't matter. Jail sentence. He went to jail. Disney would not. He would be radioactive to them.
He would be, but and it kind of broke in the height of Home Improvement's popularity on the air. And Tim's just kind of goes to Disney like, look, let's just talk about this. Let's address it. I'll say I made mistakes in my past. Let's not try and sweep it under the rug. So Tim wanted to be apt and out about it. And that's how Disney handled that when in the mid 90s that broke. And even in 1997, he got busted again for DUI. And well, guess what? He's still the voice of Buzz Lightyear. He's still going to be in Toy Story 4. So Disney, can still work with Tim Allen, even though he's made some dumb mistakes in his past. I think you could work with James Gunn again.
Well, I mean, here's the other thing that you could bring up as an example. How many years has Robert Downey Jr. been the highest paid actor? There was like a solid 2 to 3 years there, right? You do remember that he served, 8 to 10 years on drug offenses? You put him in as Tony frickin' Stark. And he's now one of the most beloved characters. Like, I've actually seen people testify on Twitter, if he ever retires from Tony Stark, they will stop watching Iron Man. That guy, same situation, went to jail and came back out. And I know he was upfront with them, but he didn't need to, because that was probably more public knowledge than Tim Allen's was, because it was Robert Downey Jr. at the time. And look at him now. How much money has he made from Disney and Marvel? And he is a guy who went to jail. I've seen numerous interviews where he's like, well, I did go to prison, and this kind of changed my overall outlook on things. We're like, how do you feel about this? Well, I did go to prison. He mentions it openly. And yet you can't handle one guy who I'll grant you, Disney, he did some stupid shit on Twitter. He did some stupid shit. But you know what? I've done stupid shit on Twitter. I'm pretty sure my panelists at one point or another have said something stupid on social media.
Oh, yeah.
Well, not on Twitter, but definitely on Facebook when I first started my account.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is like, people make mistakes. How is it that your corporate staff does not understand something that I'm pretty certain Walt Disney would understand? And for that, people are probably going to start seeing a red laser right about here, and it's going to be in the shape of a mouse.
Yep. The Mickey Mouse Riot Squad is never far behind.
They really aren't. So I'm at least happy that I'm heartened that this happened, because the bottom line is that have whatever feelings you do about the Kathleen Kennedy situation. This is one where a lot of us can come together and say, this is a bad idea because this guy has made this franchise what it is. And he's being accountable about it. Like, how many times in TV and movies and all that do you see personal accountability being like the main focus of something to be taught? You don't really see that anymore. Especially, I would actually say to the younger generations, like, this would be something that needs to be taught in Disney movies. Not so much. It's like a side plot kind of thing. I actually had to go back and see, like, when was this a major deal? The earliest thing, and maybe you guys will think of something earlier. The earliest one I thought of was Brave. Brave, because all of the actions that lead into that are Merida's fault, and she has to admit that. That's the earliest I could come up with where accountability was a major plot thread in a Disney movie.
Yeah, it's very much a tricky thing, but again, the thing that I think we all need to remember is that Disney, first and foremost, is a business. And so they're not really going to care about the politics. What they care about is whether or not it affects their bottom line. And like I said, firing James Gunn, purely a PR move. The petition probably won't change anything, but if it's enough to get to basically make it so that Guardians 3 doesn't do as well, which, let's face it, people who go to Marvel movies are probably some of the most loyal fans, even though they probably shouldn't be. It's a case of that would be the only way to actually get Disney to listen is to hit them in the wallet.
And this is actually one of those things where I've considered it myself. I don't know about you guys, but the fact that Volume 3 does not have James Gunn, I love Volume 1 and 2. Alex can attest to it. I love them. And I'm debating whether or not to go see Volume 3 because I just don't know if this is one of those things where we can put it in a brand spanking new director.
And I'm the opposite camp where I have no horse in this race since I've really stopped watching Marvel movies. The only one I've seen was Infinity War recently, and that's it.
Yep. So I think we pretty much covered the subject. And since the next one is kind of related, I'm going to go ahead and go into it. So this is a story that broke earlier this week. People, I know a few of our listeners have been following this story. I've actually been following it a little bit too. People might be familiar with Chris Hardwick, who is the host of The Talking Dead, who got removed from his show over allegations of abuse made by his ex-girlfriend, Chloe Dykstra. I think I'm saying that right. And for those who don't know what the accusations are, I'm not necessarily going to go full on into the article. The best way I know how to sum it up is she made a lot of Me Too accusations where she accused Hardwick of verbal abuse, mental abuse, even sexual abuse in some points in her article. And this caused a lot of problems for Hardwick, so much so that AMC was concerned about it. They took him off The Talking Dead, and it was not necessarily the best thing for him. But I'm actually very happy in this regard because the next thing AMC did was they actually hired, the firm of Loeb and Loeb, which is a firm that kind of goes into these situations and does proper investigations onto the background of it, whether the claims are legitimate, whether they are actually harmful, whether he actually did them. And here's the official statement that was actually made by I believe the quote was made by AMC. Following a comprehensive assessment by AMC, working with Ivy Kagan Behrman of the firm Loeb and Loeb, who has considerable experience in this area, Chris Hardwick will return to AMC as the host of The Talking Dead, and talking with Chris Hardwick. We take these matters very seriously, and given the information available to us after a very careful review, including interviews and with numerous individuals, we believe returning Chris to work is the appropriate step. Now, I did hear that Hardwick kind of did so, at least, I don't know if he actually threatened lawsuits or anything like that, but I do know that he was talking to people to see, what his next course of action was. Aside from, I believe he kind of nobly stepped down from Talking Dead, but he wasn't necessarily happy about it. Overall, I am very happy that AMC did the investigation and came to an assessment where Chris Hardwick could return to work. I'm not necessarily saying that these things didn't happen. I'm saying from this investigation's perspective, it isn't as bad as Chloe is making it out to be, and it's not as harmful to AMC as they may have initially thought, and therefore they're well within their rights to bring Chris Hardwick back onto The Talking Dead. Now, Hardwick isn't necessarily on just yet. The interim host, Yvette Nicole Brown, is still going to be serving up for the season 9 preview special, and I think it's all the way up into. So that'll be airing August 5th. She will also appear as a guest on August 12th on the August 12th episode of Talking Dead. But after that point, Hardwick will be back to full schedule with Talking Dead. And also, he did get pulled off some panels as a moderator, so that's going to stop happening too. So thoughts on this one? This is another thing where I'm actually kind of happy the system's working. The system's working. People are doing these proper investigations and realizing that, yeah, we kind of are destroying lives. And when it's not entirely founded, we can come back on it.
Yeah, it's very much a tricky thing with allegations like this, especially since things like sexual assault are really difficult crimes to prove. And so, I mean, at least good on AMC for actually hiring people with experience in the field to investigate. I don't really have any opinions of Chris Hardwick and himself because I don't watch The Walking Dead or The Talking Dead. Or
I've only ever seen interviews from him. I've never, because I'm not a fan of Walking Dead. So
yeah, and so there I have no real horse in that race, but it's kind of a case of, as for the actual allegations and as for the actual situation, I can't really comment on that since this is a whole separate can of worms. But at least AMC shows, okay, let's actually investigate. Let's bring in people who know what they're doing to investigate. Whether or not Loeb and Loeb has a reputation of being fair, I can't say. But as a case, at least they're showing, hey, let's not jump the gun.
I will say, because for the story, I did read Chloe's statement. And I will say the one thing I kind of tended to notice is that a lot of presumptions were made on her part, and it doesn't feel like in that article they were ever asked upon. And so a lot of the behavior that she accuses him of, I would actually say again, I'm not criticizing or anything like that, but you know, in relationships of any kind, you have to be somewhat assertive. And you have to be able to say, okay, so you don't like this stuff. And a lot of her statement reads like she never did. She just kind of became that, for lack of a better term, bearskin rug and just took it kind of thing. And so I have a feeling that the investigation kind of proved that way too, is like a lot of these accusations, yeah, they're pretty nasty, but there's a lot of stuff here that could have been avoided and isn't necessarily as serious as you're making it out to be.
Yeah, and looking at this, though, that's why I'm not really commenting on like it itself, because I'm looking over the article itself as well, and so it's very much a case where this is a lot more complex. So as for the actual allegations, I can't really speak to, but it's very much a case. There's a lot of facets to this that we'll probably never learn about. The only comprehensive story of these allegations we have is from Chloe herself, but again, you
also have Chris's testimony on it. You know, like you need to hear his side of the story too.
Well, yeah, but that's a case of there are certain factors that we will probably never learn.
No.
And honestly, it's a case where with AMC, as far as their position, is a case of, hey, they did their part, we investigated it, we don't see any reason to dismiss him, so that's our stance, and that's most that AMC can do.
I don't know about you. I even tried to look up like a Chris Hardwick rebuttal for it, and I didn't find any. So yeah. I think out of respect, he just kind of kept quiet.
Yeah, which is honestly probably the smart thing to do whenever any allegations, whether you actually did the thing or not, even if you didn't, it's usually best to stay silent to avoid escalating the situation further. I speak from personal experience on that front.
Yeah.
But honestly, looking at it, it's a case where, yeah, I mean, good on AMC for investigating. The PR is still probably going to take a fair bit of a hit. But again, it kind of shows the virtue of, hey, let's not jump the gun and try to completely throw them under the bus right out the gate. But whether or not that is because of nepotism or not, it's, again, this is a very sticky subject.
Yeah, and my statements aren't necessarily like I don't bring up my assessment of her accusations to say, oh, evil woman or anything like that. No, I'm not. I'm giving my assessment of what I've read. The biggest thing that I want people to take out of this is that this is what, like, we brought up Me Too accusations and Harvey Weinstein and stuff like that so many times. And this is the solution that we wanted people to do. We wanted proper investigations because, look, whether it's true or not, accusations like this can have the potential to destroy lives. And so at that point, the fact that this firm was brought in to properly investigate it, that's what I'm applauding here, is that the investigation happened. This was their assessment. Chris Hardwick's back in his job. If they made their assessment saying, yeah, he probably did all this stuff and said, Chris probably shouldn't go back to work, I probably stand by that too. I'm just happy that we finally had an investigation into the matter. We weren't just standing by somebody's accusations on the internet kind of thing. We actually went into it. Alex, you look like you've had some thoughts on this one. So go ahead.
You've said it all. I definitely agree that I think this was a good thing it's an internal investigation by AMC. So as far as AMC goes, they're saying that in their professional opinion, there's no reason Chris Hardwick should not be reinstated to his position because Right. I don't think it's not like the firm ruling on any of the allegations. It's just more like we see no reason that he should not be entitled to still work because, it's essentially a little bit of the company's own due process. So I'm happy about that.
I mean, at least we could say like the serious accusations of like of sexual or not sexual harassment. She actually accuses him of sexual assault. Like that stuff got ruled out. And so at that point, like, unfortunately, like verbal harassment, verbal abuse is harder to prove. Mm-hmm. And so at that point, like they probably can't say too much on that matter, but every other claim, they just said, nah, okay, this might have happened. And, Chris Hardwick might be sorry, but this is not warranting his life be destroyed. This is not warranting that he never get a job again kind of thing. And guys, we just barely got done with James Gunn. Like, mistakes can destroy lives, but also people making accusations that aren't accurate can destroy lives too. I mean, people who don't already know this, I do a pro wrestling podcast. We've had to cover a couple of stories this year where that's exactly what's happened, where their lives got destroyed and then they went to criminal court and eventually a judge said, yep, there's no evidence. And that guy's life is still destroyed because that doesn't help them. Being exonerated in a court of law doesn't necessarily help them because you still have the public image of you did this. We don't care what the court, it's like OJ. All right. OJ got acquitted and the court actually said that, but everybody still thought, well, you did it. That still happens. And so I'm at least happy that we had the investigation and these were the assessments that happened. If they came down the negative for him, the same deal. At least there was an investigation for it. All right. Final thoughts on this one before we move into our last story of the evening, because I think we pretty much hit the nail on the head here.
Yeah, and honestly, this very much delves into a topic that is like a lot bigger than the three of us. I mean, we already went into detail when the sexual harassment stuff started at the start of the year. And so, again, there's still a lot of details that we'll probably never learn. Again, at least AMC is hoping to do their due diligence. It's just a case. I don't see this going away anytime soon, but AMC is very much of the position of, hey, we did our part. Anything else that goes further, we're like, it's very much, hey, we did our thing. Anything else, you're basically settling outside of us. It's very much, to kind of use the biblical example, they're very much pulling the Pontius Pilate of, okay, we've done our due diligence, we wash our hands of this, we're done.
Yeah, exactly. And at this point, good on you, AMC, for doing that due diligence. I'm going to give you that credit. All right, moving into the final story that we have. I think we covered the not the reboot, but the final season of Samurai Jack earlier this year when that debuted, and a lot of people loved it. But it's actually been very beneficial for Genndy Tartakovsky as he's been able to get a lot of work since then, including this, where Genndy Tartakovsky has gotten 2 offers from Sony Pictures Animation. One we know of, one we don't know too much on, and the one that we know about is going to be, where was the name for it? It's titled Fixed, and it's going to be an R-rated comedy. Now, the other one that we know about is called Black Knight. It's going to be an adventure film. We don't really know much aside from that, and frankly, I don't think it's too written just yet. From what I understand, like Fixed is written, so Gendy's going to go with that. But a lot of people have actually been questioning, they've either been questioning whether Genndy should be the one to do it, or they've also been applauding because, well, they saw that final season of Samurai Jack and saw what he was actually able to do with it. And so now Sony Pictures Animation is going to give him a featured film where he's going to do an R-rated comedy in animation. Now, for some of the geeks that follow this podcast, that might not necessarily be the greatest of news, or like it's not a revelation because, well, you watch anime, you've watched numerous other animated series that have done this, but those have been in TV formats. First of all, anime. So originally it was written, it was animated somewhere else, so they had to adapt to it. But then you also had movies and TV shows that went to formats like Netflix, that went to HBO. Those are not as scrupulously judged as, say, something from Illumination. This would be. this would be an R-rated comedy going out to as a feature film to mainstream theaters. And that's why it's such a cool thing for Genndy Tartakovsky to be able to take that on, especially considering the success that he's had with the final season of Samurai Jack.
As well as the success with films like the Hotel Transylvania.
That's right. He's part of the Hotel Transylvania. And actually in this article,
the main director.
And in fact, I think in this article, they actually do hint that Hotel Transylvania 4 and 5 are happening.
Yeah, but like that's far down the road, but it's actually a one-off joke saying like, oh, like he's been like attached to do 2 more films. Fear not, it's not Drac Pack 4 and 5, and obviously reference to Hotel Transylvania. But of course, they're going to find a way to keep that going because that's been a good cash cow for Sony. But looking at it, it's a case of, hey, it's a very talented animation director who actually understands more how to tell a story through animation, both with 3D and with 2D. And also the other precedent is said is that there was the film Sausage Party that was also very successful. That was also an R-rated comedy. And so Sony's looking at that and thinking, okay, that film did really well. We can get in on that. Let's put in someone that we know can do good work with animation and have them work his magic.
And Genndy is one of those guys that has a long-standing reputation. I mean, a lot of that is established through Cartoon Network. I think he's even done some writing for shows on Nickelodeon. He eventually did Hotel Transylvania. He's got a long-standing record with animation, and a good record at that. In fact, I like a quote from the article from Christine Belson, who is the president of Sony Pictures Animation, on Genndy. Genndy is one of the most singular voices in animation today, and we are overjoyed to have him develop his next original features at Sony Pictures Animation, where he began his theatrical career nearly a decade ago. His imagination and talent have no boundaries, which will be made abundantly clear by the 2 wildly different movies he'll be directing next. Okay, that's a lot of praise. Like, they have a lot of, at least Christine Belson has a lot of faith in what Genndy's going to provide. And here's the thing: anybody who's followed Genndy Tartakovsky's work, they have that faith too. Like, I haven't seen every single episode of Samurai Jack. I am going to finish it. I haven't even seen the new season. I'm waiting until I do that marathon through the other seasons so that I can get myself caught up. But I've seen Clone Wars, or his 15-minute additions to Clone Wars, not the CG series. I've seen Dexter's Laboratory, which is amazing writing on his part. I've also seen some of the other things that he's been able to work on. I didn't know that he was actually initially part of Hotel Transylvania until maybe like this year. And now I'm actually kind of interested in watching Hotel Transylvania and seeing how good it is.
Yep, and especially looking at this, it's part of a trend that I've been noticing is that Sony has been trying to venture out more into animation as of late. I mean, the article itself, since we're going off of a Cartoon Brew article, makes mention of the upcoming Into the Spider-Verse that Sony is starting to push, where it's an animated Spider-Man film as opposed to live action.
Which Drac and Shadow fans will notice the division between me and Alex on it. I'm actually getting kind of sold on Into the Spider-Verse. I might go see it, but I think Alex is like, no, I'm not going to go see it.
Yeah, not interested.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the sold camp mainly because the story interests me, and hey, it's not tied to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which means I can actually enjoy it without the obnoxious Easter eggs. But back on point, it looks like Sony realizing that, oh, hey, let's maybe actually take more of a risk. I mean, this guy's proven himself 3 times over, and Samurai Jack was successful enough. Let's give him an R-rated comedy. Let's give him an action-adventure film and see if he can work that same magic because, well, animation in the United States is kind of hitting a bit of a rut where it's basically dominated by Disney or Illumination. Those are kind of the 2 big fairs you're looking at. It's either massive budgeted, like
little bit of DreamWorks here too.
Well, little bit, but DreamWorks has kind of been having an identity crisis. But I'm talking overall approach. You've got Disney, which they produce these animated films that take almost like 3 or 4 years to develop and bring to fruition. And then you've got Illumination, which basically throws these films out as quickly and as cheaply as possible. And Sony is trying to find its own niche in that sort of market. And here it looks like, okay, well, we kind of realized that the Emoji Movie burned us really badly, so let's maybe try going back towards the artistic credibility route, see if we can bring back some of the people we've pissed off.
Yeah, because I was correct me if I'm wrong, who was the studio that did Kubo?
That's Laika.
That was Laika. So Yeah. Okay. So at that point, like the stuff that Sony Pictures Animations put out, it's like Hotel Transylvania. They put out the Emoji Movie. What else have they done? Like,
Sausage Party by extension is theirs.
oh, is that theirs?
But yeah, kind of again by extension because it's primarily produced through Columbia Pictures, which is of course owned by Sony, and Sony Pictures did distribute it.
Was Sony the Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs guys?
Yeah, that was them.
Okay, so it's like they had a rocky start, but they've since been able to at least find their footing until, like Romney said, the Emoji Movie happened, which is funny because like we all consider that to be bad, right? You do realize that Wreck-It Ralph 2 is looking to do the exact same thing, right, guys?
Yeah, but the fundamental difference here is that the Emoji Movie, the fact that it didn't even give it a different title and just literally called it the Emoji Movie, kind of speaks volumes. Whereas Wreck-It Ralph, we already have one. Because the difference,
we have an established movie saying that they can handle stuff like this.
Well, yeah, and it's a case where you have a movie that established who those characters are in a way that's enjoyable to audiences, and then they're taking those established characters and then putting them in a new setting. It's like Kingdom Hearts. You're taking established characters like Donald and Goofy and placing them in different scenarios. Granted, you have Sora, who's kind of the odd man out, but again, that's
Sora's the original creation.
Yes, the original DeviantArt creation.
Your words, not mine.
Come at me, Kingdom Hearts fans.
Hey, if I've learned anything from the Kingdom Hearts YouTube community, they instead will take responsibility for your words, and that way you don't ever have to take responsibility for them.
Yeah, all joking aside, though, it's very much a case where Sony is kind of realizing, okay, well, going the Illumination route, even though they actually did buy and technically own Illumination and are still distributing those films, it's kind of a case of, okay, our in-house team doing the Illumination model didn't work, trying to copy these other people didn't work. That seems more they're basically trying to, I guess they're just trying to find a niche to fill that isn't dominated by Disney or Illumination. And so that's probably why they're taking this gamble. And I'm hoping, really, really hoping that it pays off and gets us kind of out of this rut that we found ourselves with animation.
Yeah, exactly. Because I would agree with you guys wholeheartedly. American animation has had something to be desired for the last few years. I mean, we've had some gems come out here and there, like Big Hero 6 was enjoyable in my eyes, as well as a few others that could be brought up. But then you look at Hotel Transylvania is okay, but it doesn't look the best. You had Kubo, which was kind of artistic, that came out, but I think that's a European studio.
Yeah, I think they're technically Canadian. I'm not sure.
Oh, is it Canadian? So probably like French Canadian. So you have like these outliers, but most of the time it's, I'm trying to think. We have a reboot of The Grinch coming out this year. So that's happening with Benedict Cumberbatch. We've had
Laika's American. It's based in Oregon.
Oh, it's based in Oregon. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that also explains a lot of things. But anyway, so we have stuff like The Grinch is being done. You have Minions, and I'm kind of a fan of the Minions, but I can understand why people don't like them. You also have stuff like Disney even has kind of faltered in recent years. With some of the stuff that they want to do, especially with the Pixar works, they want to do. Okay, I'm going to lay off Toy Story, even though I think that Toy Story was done a while ago. But I'm still hearing about Cars movies that they want to do. I'm still hearing about other projects that they want to take on that don't sound as awesome as like Incredibles 3.
Oh, yeah. Then you've got
like Japan has not had this issue. They just keep on pushing the envelope and they keep on making box office gold, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, yeah, but that's an apples and oranges comparison because, again, you're dealing with a country that treats animation differently as opposed to the United States, where it's still pigeonholed as a kid's medium.
No, I agree. It's an apples and oranges thing, but it is definitely something where you look at American animation and where it's going, and then you look at Japan and Europe and what they're actually trying to do. It does leave something to be desired.
Yeah, and hopefully and I'm not saying that Gendy is like the second coming of animation Christ. It's just a case of, hey, if there's ever anyone you could trust to push the envelope and produce something of quality like he did with Samurai Jack, because people forget, back before Samurai Jack, yeah, there were some decent action shows, but they didn't really do much in the way of being visually interesting. A lot of it was very much, let's animate these action scenes as cheaply as possible. I mean, case in point, the X-Men cartoon from the 90s is a good example of this, whereas Genndy Tartakovsky saw, hey, action cartoons today are kind of crappy. Let's make a good, decent action show that actually is an action show, which is why most of the episodes are mostly silent, because it's all about the visual action.
Well, and if you also look at the concept of Samurai Jack, up until that point, everything was catering to kids. Even like Dexter's Laboratory was catering more to kids, and it had humor more built for kids, but with subtle. It was like this. It was like The Simpsons. It had subtle tie-ins for adults that people would like. And Samurai Jack pushed that envelope and actually said, yes, cartoons can be adult. They can be catered to a family environment as well as to an older demographic. And that's what kind of pushed the envelope for later series like Avatar to be able to come out. And even the stuff that pushes the envelope today can lend credit as far as I'm concerned, because Samurai Jack was one of those few in that time frame that pushed that envelope and said, yes, we can do this. We can cater this to adults.
Yeah, and so looking at it, Genndy is probably the safest bet in terms of, okay, let's do something that is genuinely risky with animation, and he's proven himself time and time again. It's a case of, okay, Genndy, we're going to give you this chance to do something outside of what we usually do, and I can kind of see this as almost being an apology of, okay, here are these 2 films you can do, sorry about Popeye.
Yeah, pretty much. The other thing that I'm also... crap, I had a chain of thought and then I completely lost it. But the other thing I was going to bring up is, like, I would tell you, like, the ultimate creation. I love Genndy, don't get me wrong, and I'll probably look into these films. Actually, that's going to be a question I have for Alex. Is like, would this actually be something that we would want to vlog about? But the other thing that just barely came to my mind is, like, what would be like the greatest pairing of animators in the U.S. right now? I couldn't really think of anything aside from like Genndy Tartakovsky writing the story and Butch Hartman doing the animation. That would be weird, but it would be kind of an interesting powerhouse to go with.
Well, given the recent controversies with Butch Hartman, that wouldn't be my first choice. Honestly, what I would want to see is maybe a pairing of, and these are both Cartoon Network alumni, having Genndy Tartakovsky working with Craig McCracken, because you had...
Ooh!
Yeah, because you had Craig McCracken, the creator of the original, aka the only good version of the Powerpuff Girls.
I was wondering if that was coming up.
And so that would be a combination worth seeing. I mean, trying to think off the top of my head of other creators. I mean, honestly, this shot in the dark, I doubt it would ever happen, but I would want to see how Genndy would handle something like Castlevania. Like, get him in touch with Adi Shankar, see how they handle the dark, grittier action sort of series. I'm not saying it would have to be Castlevania specifically, but given Adi Shankar's MO...
No, you have a good idea. You have a good idea, because I think Genndy would be faithful to it. If Genndy was a Castlevania fan, then I think he'd be faithful to it.
But yeah, I mean, honestly, there was actually a recent animated short that actually showed a really cool concept. It's a fan-made animation, but the premise is Samurai Witcher. Now, it's not what you think. It's like, oh, it's like Japanese Witcher. No, it's like, imagine if someone made an animated series based on The Witcher in the style of Samurai Jack. And instead of it being like an over-the-top parody, it's like a case of, oh no, they actually took the way Genndy Tartakovsky would tell a story and just took a basic storyline from The Witcher,
That'd be
basic
cool.
monster encounter. And so maybe even giving Genndy Tartakovsky some sort of, and that's probably what he's getting with Black Knight, is some sort of a high fantasy sort of concept. I'm not saying we're going to get like Berserk level animation, but, well, I hope not. But I'm meaning in terms of, oh, it's not like we're going to be seeing a Genndy Tartakovsky version of Guts, as cool as that would probably be. But it's a case where it's very much a case of, like, there are people that could be paired up. There could be like various animators that you could pair up, but it's also a case where maybe even just giving them the right type of material to adapt as well.
Yeah.
And so hopefully that's probably what we're like. Between the two, Black Knight has me peaked, because it's a case of, okay, is it going to be a period adventure piece? Is it going to be pure fantasy? It could go in a lot of different directions. And
that's the funniest thing about this article is, like, Fix sounds interesting, don't get me wrong, but Black Knight is the one that I'm more intrigued about. Like, what? Because here's the thing. Gendy has done comedy. Don't get me wrong. He's done it. And I don't have a problem with him doing R-rated comedy. I think he can do it well, but I love it when Gendy does adventure, specifically like Samurai Jack. So at that point, I am interested in Black Knight simply because I know what he can do there. And I like the ideas that he tries to explore. Alex, what is your take on the Gendy situation? Like, are you okay with these movies being done? I mean, obviously, like I said, are we going to vlog these? Like, is this something that you want to
do? I'm okay with them being done, and I am definitely curious. I do want to see a little more, see what he's actually going to do. R-rated comedy always has the way. It can either go two ways. It can either be really, really funny, really clever, or it could just be a lot of lewd jokes. So yeah, I trust Tartakovsky would make a pretty good show. Obviously, I want to just see a premise or see what he's gonna do. Right now, we're just in an early planning phase. So, but I'm very curious. I think it's interesting, and if Sony doesn't break the bank on this budget wise, this could be a nice, tidy little investment and nice, tidy return for them.
And Gendy might be the guy to be able to do it since he's done animation budgets before, and I think he would be able to do it as efficiently as possible. I mean, for crying out loud, how many seasons did Jack go? Like 5?
Well, 4 on Cartoon Network, the 5th one on Adult Swim.
The 5th on Adult Swim, yeah. So, I mean, he was the showrunner for that, so he's shown that he can handle a budget. Final thoughts on this one before we wrap things up for the evening, because I think it's pretty much across the board. We're excited for what Gendy has cooking.
Yep, and Gendy, I've yet to think of anything Gendy's worked on that has ever really been a disappointment, and so it's.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of one, and I can't really think of a project that's been lackluster from him.
Like the most I can think of is usually like maybe some episodes of Dexter's Lab, but those are usually for factors beyond Gendy's control, usually due to changes mandated by Cartoon Network.
Well, and some of those episodes aren't necessarily entirely done by him. Like, he's the executive producer for it. He isn't directing it. So, I mean, I'm looking up his filmography right now. He's done Samurai Jack. He's done the Clone Wars, Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. He actually was the supervising producer for that. Powerpuff Girls, supervising producer. Let's see, Dexter's Laboratory. Like, a lot of the stuff that he's done, Symbionic Titan, I don't know this one, but he's the executive producer for that.
Yeah, and that was it was an ambitious but short-lived television series. The classic case of typical only one season because they couldn't sell toys, mainly because they didn't put it at time slots anyone could actually watch it.
Even then, like, you look at some of this stuff, it's all fairly successful. I'm not the biggest fan of Billy and Mandy, but it was successful. I can't deny that. Powerpuff Girls, that's successful. Dexter's Lab, the Clone Wars minis led into a Clone Wars series. You know, despite Alex's misgivings about that series, they have those 15-minute vignettes that happened from Gendy to spur that on.
Yeah, and it gave a lot of characters that are now still considered canon. Case in point, Asajj Ventress. General Grievous, in my opinion, the best he's ever looked has been the Gendy version. That's when I felt like he was the most intimidating. So yeah, I completely agree on this one. And I look forward to what he's going to do with these two projects. We'll see what he has in store. Let's go ahead and wrap things up for the evening, though, because that is all the stories that we have tonight. So if people want to be able to discuss the stories that we talked about tonight, as well as in the pre-show, or they just want to be able to check out our content or be able to talk to us and get some tips or whatever you want to talk to us about, Stephen Romney, how do they do that for you? Well, you can always find me under my handle, Studio Ghost Utah. That is my handle both on YouTube and on Facebook. I'm also on Instagram under Romney Does Art, although I haven't really done much art lately. And I'm also on Twitter at Romney Reviews, which is the best way to get a hold of me if you want to submit any questions or any things you want me to look at specifically. I know I'm beating a dead horse here, but seriously, Adam's got enough on his plate. That is how you can contact me. Yes. And as for this week's Romney's recommendation, I'm changing what I was initially going to recommend since I already mentioned it. And the YouTube channel if you were listening throughout this whole show, the YouTube channel Mashed is the channel that produced the Samurai Witcher short. And so if you want to see an animated short that understands both what makes The Witcher work and what makes Samurai Jack work without being dismissive or trying to be an overt parody of either one, I highly recommend you check out their short, Samurai Witcher. If you ever wanted to see what it would look like if Genndy Tartakovsky was having to adapt The Witcher to an animated series, this would be the way to into it. It's actually really well done. And honestly, I wish that was what we were getting instead of the live-action Witcher series we were getting on Netflix. So that's this week. Romney's recommendation is Mashed YouTube short, Samurai Witcher, Geralt versus the Griffin.
And with Romney's recommendations, we actually did get an interesting question from a listener. So the question is roughly, can people make recommendations to you to do for Romney's recommendations? I don't know if this is something we've actually talked about.
I'm open to it, but again, send it to me on Twitter, send it to me directly, and then I'll consider checking it out. If I'm putting my foot down here. If you send it to Adam and he tries to pass it on to me, I'm gonna put the cutoff of, if you send it to Adam, I'm not gonna see it. So if you can get it to me directly, either through Twitter or
So at this point, I'm going to bring this up, but again, you need to bring it up to Romney. So he set the rule here, but the recommendation that this guy gave was the Boom Studios Power Rangers run, including Shattered Grid. And so again, you guys need to bring it up to Romney, but if Romney agrees to it, I'll point this out right here now. I'll join him for it, because the more I hear about that Boom Studios Power Rangers comic, the more I want to read it.
Yeah, I'm still really behind because I've been following the series. It's just my stack of comics, the pile of shame has grown quite extensively. I haven't even read all of my free comic book day haul.
But at the same time, has the Boom Studios Power Rangers been a recommendation? I don't think it has.
We've discussed. I haven't given it I think I may have given the first issue a specific recommendation, but I know we've talked about the Lord Drakon arc a little bit as well.
And the Shattered Grid trailer, because that got brought up to us too.
Yeah, and so we've mentioned it. I may have recommended maybe the early issue. Oh no, I remember. I recommended Power Rangers Pink, which was also Boom Studios. That was the mini-series focusing on Kimberly. That I remember I recommended that, and I still highly recommend that if you haven't read it already, because again, it answers the question of why did she leave Tommy and gives a very satisfying answer.
Yeah. So at that point, again, I'm going to say, leave this recommendation to Romney. Yeah. And if he does it, I'll do it with him.
Yeah. Send it to me on Twitter. And again, if you don't get it to me directly, I'm not going to look at it. I have to put my foot down here because, again, the guy's got a second kid on the way. Let's not add to his workload.
Yeah. And Alex the Shadow Blazer, how do people get a hold of you?
You can find me on YouTube. Shadow Blazer 3000 is my channel, and I do anime-related content. I'll probably get a quick and dirty video up pretty soon. Just a little simple thing, nothing too fancy. We'll have to wait and see what the weekend brings for me. But, and in the meantime, also, if you want to follow me on social media, always be up to date on when a new video does come out, or just whatever stupid things I find funny on Twitter. Follow me at AlexJShort, and I just want to point out another funny little tweet. Thank you to the Darwin Award on Twitter for the picture of this great t-shirt that I totally would love to give to my older sister because she is a nurse. It says, "Nurse, the first person you see after saying, 'Hold my beer and watch this.'"
She would smack you. She's like, "Don't remind me of this." Send me a pic of this so that I can put it in the RSS feed too.
Again, it's in my Twitter feed because I did retweet it. So
okay, I'll check it out so that I can get the picture for it. But all right, and then if people want to be able to get a hold of me, the best ways to be able to do so is, first of all, check out my YouTube channel, which you're currently on. I do Let's Play content. I do reviews. I know the reviews are kind of backed up, but we're going to be getting caught up very soon. I've actually been very hard at work working on past reviews as well as being able to get up to speed. And actually, I've been working very hard to get a review of Octopath Traveler out as soon as I possibly can, but I've got another game coming out in the next little bit, and I've got a baby on the way. So I will get that to you guys as quickly as I can. And also, if you guys want to reach out to me on Twitter, you can do so at Dirac2326. I try to respond to you guys as quickly as I am able, but occasionally some things fall through the cracks. If I have not responded to you, send it out again. I might not have seen it. That would be one thing that I would also recommend to people. Because here's the thing. I'm tolerant of social media, but I'm getting more and more intolerant over the months as more and more advertising makes its way into my feed. And most of my day is spent muting a lot of that advertising. So make sure to, if you get mad that I haven't seen it, that I haven't responded, it's probably because I haven't seen it. And then, of course, if you guys want to support the podcast, the first thing that we recommend to you guys above and foremost is to support the RSS feed. So you can either go to geekyweek.podomatic.com for it, or you can look up the GNRO podcast or Geek News Reviews and Opinions podcast on iTunes and Google Play for Android users. It is available in both, and it is as up-to-date as it can be, at least for the moment. I do have a couple of other episodes that are coming up very soon, so you guys can look forward to that. And then also you can support us on social media, and it's under the exact same tagline for Twitter and for Facebook, which is Geeky NRO. And you'll get up to the minute information when we're going live, the stuff we're going to be talking about. I have actually considered whether or not to put the pre-show stuff in there so you guys can discuss it as well. You guys can let me know there, and that's where you can support us for social media. And of course, if you want to submit stories or submit feedback, you can do so at geekyweek@gmail.com. And that's going to go ahead and do it for us this evening. Thank you guys so much for your continued love and support and patience for the podcast. We really do appreciate all of it. And of course, we will be back next week for even more Geek News, Reviews, and Opinions. So for me, for Alex, and for Romney, we'll see you guys next time.